live?
We are now officially live. Hello, everybody. Welcome
Okay.
to the podcast. We're just gonna ramble on and on about stuff that's interesting to us, and hopefully, it's interesting to you. This is my good friend, Dude Missile. Welcome to the show, Dude Missile. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. I just thought like we've been talking about doing a podcast for a while,
Yeah.
and I feel like we probably both have enough of a backlog of topics that we could do a good one now. So I just thought like I listened to some Dune chapters just a couple hours ago,
Right.
and so I was like, oh, okay, this is giving me thoughts, right?
Yeah, dude. Yeah, I love the Dune series, man. Like, it's such a psychedelic, crazy adventure. You know, people got out of this robot AI war. For those of you that don't know what Dune is, and they have to rely on human skill and capability to maintain this, intergalactic empire with all these spaceships. Uh, but they can't use computers, so they have to
Yeah.
branch off. In these breeding programs, these different kind of additional technologies besides computers to like create this thing called a mentat. That's one of the more interesting offshoots of humanity, or I guess they're still considered human, but they're so different because they can calculate everything. They're like a living computer that has a soul still, that's not going to go betray everybody and start trying to be a robot overlord. Um, what do you think is
Yeah.
the most interesting kind of side species or subspecies of in Dune?
I mean, maybe it's an easy answer, but the sort of concept of the Kwisatz Haderach
Mm-hmm.
is is probably the most interesting to me because like the Dune itself is like you read it and you go, oh yeah, no, this was the 60s.
Yeah.
like like you can see the sort of psychedelic counterculture like woven into the whole book because the whole plot is about how there's like a psychedelic drug that is the backbone of galactic economics because
Right.
it's necessary for people to they need people to be able to expand their consciousness to be able to navigate safely through space using what is it, the Holtzman drives? Is that what they're called?
Yeah, the Holtzman drive, and
Yeah. So
basically they fold space, and the only way you can safely fold space is if you know what is on the other side uh, when you're folding it. Otherwise, you'll blow up or something. So you have to take all these psychedelic drugs, this spice, for you to see all the moves that would result in your death, and choose the one that doesn't, and make the jump.
right. It's the old wizard problem of like teleportation, right? Where you got to know exactly the right place to teleport to, otherwise, you teleport into a rock and die, you
Yeah.
know? Um but what's interesting about the Kwisatz Haderach, so for those who either know have only like heard of Dune or uh don't know a lot about it, like this is your spoiler warning because we might get into we probably will get into spoiler territories at points. So either go watch the movie or read the book, and then come back if you really don't want spoilers. But with
Right.
that said, um, like the Kwisatz Haderach is basically, so you have these people called the Bene Gesserits. They're sort of a faction in the Dune universe of like psychic women basically. So they have like these various abilities. They're sort of social manipulators, and so they all have the ability to like use this thing called the voice, where they sort of command you to do something, and they have a particular like tone that they reach that like manipulates you on a psychological level so that you do what they're telling you to without even thinking about it, right? So they can basically force people to do things. And but they also have other powers, so they have particular subset of them are called the truth sayers, who are basically these women who have the ability to like detect with like almost perfect accuracy whether or not someone is lying, right? So
Yeah.
the Bene Gesserit. Oh, and one last one. There's the Reverend Mothers, and the Reverend Mothers have the ability to like look into the genetic memory of the species, right? so they can look into their own genetic memory and go back through the memories of their ancestors. Sort of like if you've ever played Assassin's Creed and the Animus, it's sort
Yeah.
of a similar idea.
Yeah, but they can
Um,
only access the feminine side of humanity, not the masculine. It's totally cut off from them.
right, and basically the idea is for like hundreds, maybe even thousands of years, the Bene Gesserit have basically, because the Bene Gesserit are like manipulators. They have like a goal they're trying to achieve, and so they manipulate the politics of the empire
Hmm.
to achieve this goal. And one of the things they're doing that they were doing for hundreds of years before the start of the first book is they had this breeding program where they had all sorts of records and stuff, and they were keeping a close track on which families were having kids with which families, and they were basically trying to guide genetics in a particular direction.
Yeah.
That direction being they were trying to create what they call the Kwisatz Haderach, which in universe translates into like the shortening of the way or something like that.
I think it's
Basically,
interesting that they could not ever create a successful Kwisatz Haderach until Jessica rebelled against the Bene Gesserits and had a child with Duke Leto out of love. I think that's what created Paul, was that love.
that's
It wasn't a sterile breeding program where you're just like pump and dump and try to make a god. These people, Jessica and Leto, they loved each other, man. And I think that, is overlooked in the book a lot.
well, that's at the part of the book I'm about halfway. So the first book of Dune is just one book, but it's split into two, like books, so to
Hmm.
speak, right? Which are like the two major halves of the story. First being, like when so basically the setup of Dune for those listening is that you have these houses, these great houses, sort of like Game of Thrones. That's what my dad finds the best thing you can really compare it to in terms of other literature is this. It's very much this story of politics. There are big battles and all these magical fantasy things, but it is a very political story, right? And the start of Dune is that there's these great houses. There's one called House Harkonnen, which has control of a planet named Arrakis. Uh, and Arrakis is the only source in the universe of this drug called spice, and it's because it's necessary for space travel to be done safely. Basically, whoever controls they say in the book, whoever controls the spice controls the universe, right? So the Harkonnens have control of Arrakis, and the Emperor he basically is trying to get rid of House Atreides because the Duke Leto of House Atreides, who's like his cousin, like his distant cousin, um, he's very popular with the other great houses, and so the Emperor fears a threat to his throne, right? He fears the Duke could overtake him. So he works with the Harkonnens, who have had like a blood feud with the Atreides for like hundreds of years, and so that's where we sort of begin with this sort of political plot where the Harkonnens have Arrakis taken away from them, the fief taken away and given to the Atreides, but it's all a trap to kill the Duke, basically,
Right.
right? And our main character is the Duke's son, Paul, who as we find out across the story, is the Kwisatz Haderach. But as Neirum alluded to, the lady Jessica, when she was married to the Duke, she was told by the Bene Gesserit to only give him daughters. And basically what the Bene Gesserit plan was that she would give the Duke a daughter, or maybe multiple daughters, and then one of them would be the one to
Right.
produce the Kwisatz Haderach. But she loved the Duke, and the Duke actually had a son at one point who was killed, and so he had no like male heir to his throne. A father wants a son,
Yeah.
sort of thing. And so, out of love for the Duke, she borns him a boy, and that's our main character, Paul.
Yeah.
And
And they never really talk about it, but it kind of alludes to the fact that they can choose what gender they're going to have. like it was her choice. It was directly her like responsibility to hit the right button on the machine or whatever to make a girl or boy
Well,
come out.
I I think if you pay attention to what they say about the Bene Gesserit, it's easy to piece together how they do it.
Mm-hmm.
So the Bene Gesserit also have like this immense control over their body's physiology. Like they can control their body on like a cellular level,
Oh
right?
yeah, you're right.
So
So she
so
actually
what so
thinks it.
right so what it is he releases, and then she chooses which sperm, and she chooses one
Oh, bro,
that is an XY,
that's
right?
wild. Yeah,
Yeah. So it's not well. I'm not. This is not directly said, but if
yeah.
it's
I
directly, if you know human biology, if you know how what determines gender, and you know the Bene Gesserit have this molecular control over their this cellular control over their body. It's an easy 1 + 1 = 2
yeah.
sort of equation,
Yeah, you're
right?
right. I never thought of it like that. You're totally right.
Yeah.
That's what she did. She used her psychic powers to make that decision.
Um.
It like at the well, I was going to talk about the end of the book, but you remember that fight, and he has to bend like a reed. I think that's what he does. He moves his body out of the way of that knife, that blade.
That's an interesting thing I think we should mention here is that in the Dune universe they have, like a lot of sci-fi universes, they have these like shield generators, right? They've got like uh technological like force fields,
Yeah,
and in Dune they're like belts. You put a belt on, and then you like tap the buckle,
right.
and then it generates a shield around your body. But the way these shields work is basically anything that's moving too fast gets blocked,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so because of that, guns are basically useless for the most part, except for what they call laser weapons, which are like laser guns.
Yeah,
But that's like a whole other can of worms. And the idea is if you were to shoot someone with a laser gun who's wearing a shield, it would like create something equivalent to a nuclear explosion, and you'd both get killed.
right.
So like basically in general in the Dune universe, it's very much like a swords and melee weapons type of like really it's all blades, right?
Yeah,
Because like a bat wouldn't even work because you can't like because you have to be able to go sort of slow and direct enough to get through the shield generator, and then you have to cut them,
yes,
right? Whereas like a blunt weapon would not work because
no,
that only works if you have a lot of force behind it,
yes,
right? So a Dune is very much this like the warfare is very bladed, right? And it's a very melee combat heavy thing. Not to say that there aren't like usage of ranged weapons, but when it comes to like a conflict between bodies, right? It becomes very much this uh, matter of swords.
mm-hmm.
You need a sword or you need a knife, right? Um, but back to you had asked me why I like the Kwisatz Haderach.
Yeah,
There's something. What we find out, Paul's like a relatively normal 15-year-old boy at the start of the book, right? And then it's
mm-hmm.
right around the midpoint when the big plot happens, and the Duke Leto is killed. There's a lot of complicated stuff we won't go into. You should read the book. It's a really good book.
yes,
But the basically Paul and Jessica are out in the desert, right? And so at this point, Paul has sort of been saturated with spice for a number of days, uh, and it's when they're in this still tent. A still tent is basically like a tent that captures all the moisture that is released from the physical body,
yeah,
right? And then it filters it and deposits it into a pouch, because there's so little water on the surface of Arrakis that every little drop needs to be conserved. I don't know
mm-hmm.
if that's the right word. You need to save your water. You need to get every last drop back you can.
Yes,
Right. And so they also have still suits, which are like a suit you wear that basically does the same thing. It captures all your body's water, right? Even the you even breathe into a tube so that you don't lose any moisture from breathing out, right? But it's around this time that Paul and his mother are out in the desert after just having their patriarch like killed, that like Paul they're sort of in a still tent in the sands, and Paul goes through this immediate like change in consciousness, right? And the like he goes through like several levels of it all at once, right? Like so it's talking about how he feels because Paul is a mentat
Yes.
is an important detail here. He's a
Well,
mentat
he's a
and
lot
he's
of
a male.
things. He has to get
Yeah,
trained in all this other. He's a warrior
yeah,
too. He's a mentat. He's a politician, and he's a psychic.
right. Well, that's the thing. That's why I like the Kwisatz Haderach because it's like this idea of like a psychedelic messiah, right? Is like
Well,
he's
he's the
basic.
Nietzschean Übermensch. That he's nothing short of that. He makes his own morals, especially his son Leto the Second. He is the true embodiment of the Übermensch. You know, he has gone above and beyond what humanity is to save it. He became like a god, the god emperor.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
But what's interesting about Paul as a character is that he's in a sense he's tripping balls all the time
yeah,
because he can base the way they describe he can like see all of time and he can see like the future, but because he's a male Bene Gesserit, right? He's able to, unlike the Reverend Mothers, he's able to look back into the genetic memory of both sides of the family, as opposed to the Reverend Mothers who can only look through the maternal side.
right.
And so he has access basically to the entire history of humanity. Um, and it's actually in that scene where they're in the tent where he's first able to do this, and his mother realizes, or the lady Jessica, Paul's mother, realizes that he is the Kwisatz Haderach, right? Because the thing about Jessica is her abilities were sort of underestimated by the Bene Gesserit, right? They didn't think she was capable, right? But like we said, she gave the Duke a son out of love, but she also thought she could do it, right? If she didn't think she could do it and that she would have fucked up a perfectly fine baby boy, she might not have.
Right.
But she thought she could do it, and so she did, and she succeeded. So Paul is like this in this scene. He's like saying in his head, he's like, "I'm a freak. I'm a monster," and he says to his mom like, what have you done to me? Because he's simultaneously like he's got these mentat abilities where he's like this incredibly logical tactician. He's able to do all sorts of logistics in his mind that
Yeah.
allow him to accurately predict the future, but also he has this knowledge of the human story due to the genetic memory, and he actually in this scene learns that his grandfather, his maternal grandfather, is the Baron Harkonnen, the leader of the Great House, who his family has had a blood feud with for centuries, right?
Yes.
And that's relevant because the Harkonnens are real bastards.
Yeah, it's
Like they
part of
rule
the
with
integration of the shadow. They have to have that edge, that part of evil, in order to defeat him. I think that's a very important part. I agree with you.
yeah, yeah. And but that just this idea of like some like because he could also see space too, right? Like that's a factor.
Hmm.
I know that was definitely a factor for Leto the Second. Like he can see everything. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, yeah,
Like the no
like that. They
ships.
had that prescience, and they can block his prescience by getting in the no ship. It's like a ship that folds dimensions in on themselves to where psychic abilities can't penetrate it.
Right. And so what I find interesting about the whole concept of the Kwisatz Haderach is this idea of like, you know, because well, let me just establish one other thing. People, there's good reason. It's pretty much confirmed that the spices, it's a metaphor for oil, but it's also a stand-in for mushrooms,
Yeah,
right?
psilocybin mushrooms. Yeah, Frank
Because
Herbert took a lot of mushrooms. He would take these trash cans full of mulch and inoculate it with psilocybin mushrooms, and just pick them off while he's writing Dune, and be tripping.
well, apparently, I think it was Paul Stamets. I don't know. There was a mycologist. It might not. I think it was Paul Stamets, but if it wasn't,
Gotta
I don't know
be.
if,
He's
what.
the only mycologist that is in the mainstream, I believe.
Yeah. But he basically said that Frank Herbert had this technique where he would like he would put like tons of spores into water,
Hmm.
and he would like mix it and turn it into a slurry, and then he would just pour that slurry uh, on like mulch or some substrate, and it
Yeah.
would grow these fucking giant ones,
Yeah,
right?
he got
Um,
these metal trash cans and he filled those with mulch, and that's what he poured the water solution with the spores in it.
and so what I find so interesting about the Kwisatz Haderach is it's like this idea of like, imagine you just took a heroic dose one day,
Yeah.
and suddenly you could see all of space,
And it doesn't
and you could
stop.
see, and that's the big thing. He can't turn it off,
No.
right? So it's like, I just imagine that situation, right?
Well,
Like
really what
imagine,
unlocked that part of him was drinking the water of life, like a hyper concentrated dose of spice. It is not anywhere in the same ballpark. We're talking about DMT, acid, mushrooms times 11, all at once. And
oh my god,
and that's what would kill people. The Kwisatz Haderach would have to drink the water of life and change it from poison into something safe, and they were unable to do that. And that's how Paul succeeded. He was able to achieve that focus,
well,
that chill, that vibe, that calmness inside of himself, that Zen state to where he could focus enough to do it.
he's a whole, like, he's such a product of the 60s,
Yeah.
right? He's a character whose whole thing is he has to learn how to keep he's tripping balls forever,
Mm-hmm.
and he has to learn how to keep it a good trip, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's almost what the golden path is. It's like, how do I make this a good trip
Yeah, he has
and
to
not a
not,
horrific nightmare?
freak out. And I guess
Yeah.
it was easier for the women to not freak out because I don't know. You could say childbirth. They're used to dealing with those levels of pain inside of themselves more often. They're not panicking. Also, they had the confidence of all the other past Bene Gesserits that were able to do it successfully, and he's well aware that no other man has been able to do this.
Right, right. And no other man basically does until his own son is born.
Yeah.
Um, and this is actually where I want to sort of branch off for a moment to talk about McKenna.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, because McKenna had this one, like, anyone who's listened to a lot of McKenna with like a keen eye knows that McKenna was not like necessarily a believer in everything he said. He was like an explorer of ideas,
Yes.
right? So he has tons of conflicting ideas that come out in his lectures, right? And he's not contradicting himself. He's just exploring ideas, right? And he had this one idea that what if what the imagination was it wasn't like a process in the human body. It wasn't like a process of the human brain that generated information, but rather it was a sense of the human body that looked out into what he called like the holographic like projection of all information, something like that, right? So this idea that like when you use your imagination, you're not creating anything. You're you're looking at something that exists somewhere, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Which I find an interesting idea. So like, what the reason I bring this up is I wonder like, what if there was like a character or a person who like was like the Kwisatz Haderach of the imagination. Can you imagine that?
Well, I think we do have examples of that. I think Carl Jung is a great example of that. I think that guy, he was able to see things and present things to people in a way that was hidden, unlocked for people. Uh, are you familiar with Carl Jung's work?
Yes, I mean I've never read any of his books, but I've read a lot about him and his work, and obviously McKenna talks about him a lot, so I picked up some stuff from there.
Yeah,
He's definitely, well, if I could just say, he's definitely more palatable than Freud.
well, yeah. Freud was just too black and white, and he believed in like a good and an evil. Jung did not believe in a good and an evil. He believed in an anima, an animus, which is the male and female aspect, and he believed in something called a shadow, which Freud would have called evil, or other people call the shadow evil. But Jung's idea is interesting because he said if you face your shadow, if you talk to it, talk to the resentment. Like if you're feeling a certain kind of way and you're feeling hatred, resentment, anger, calm down and ask yourself internally, why am I feeling this way? What could be contributing to this? And then you illuminate it, and the shadow diminishes. You integrate that shadow into you. So whenever you create a good versus evil argument, there's something within and something without. And that creates war every time. We're seeing that with politics today. I would like to see people on both sides, kind of say, I see your point. And then they say, I see your point. How do we come to build a bridge here and do something that kind of fits? But, that's not what people are interested in. We're interested in this team against the other one. You're good. We're good. You're evil. We will defeat you. The only way to victory in the future is total domination. And you see that in a lot of the mainstream religions too. You have an evil and you have a good. You go far enough back with religion, it's not like that at all. Like the character Loki. Some people might consider him evil in Norse mythology. But no, his function was that of mischief. He was a little chaotic, but he stirred the pot enough to continue the story along, to make things happen. Without Loki, the stories would not be as interesting, and there wouldn't be these lessons that we learn along the way through this interaction, through the story being told. So that's the most important thing I think Jung has contributed to society, is the introduction of that idea, the shadow.
Yeah. I think my first introduction to Jung, this might sound strange, it was a Japanese RPG series that was sort of a it was very anime, right, in terms of its style, but basically it was about Jungian psychology. It's called Persona.
Right.
Basically the whole idea is it's like half the game is like a life simulator where you play as a high schooler, but then the other half of the game is like a dungeon crawler where you fight monsters in the collective unconscious, right? So there's like people and they have shadows, and the shadow is like the reflection of their dark inner thoughts, right? And they exist in this shadow world that basically is the Jungian collective unconscious, and you run into all sorts of it's sort of like Pokemon, like where you have like these monsters that you collect, and they're all like mythological archetypes, right? So there'll be like the angel, there'll be like jesters, there'll be like even god, like personifications of gods at some point. I think that was probably my first introduction to Jung. But if we could go in another direction now, because one thing we had talked about it briefly before, but I think this would be a good time to talk about it again.
Yeah.
Umami, the YouTube creator.
Yeah.
Umami.
Interface.
He's like my favorite creator right now. Like his visual style is so interesting. I meant to put on the I'm listening to one of the soundtrack, but I accidentally put on the video itself, so I got distracted for a second. But like his first off, visually he's so interesting. His work is so interesting because it's like his color theory is on point, but it's also very strange. Like when you see a thing by Umami, what makes it stand out is that you've never seen anything like it,
Oh, no, yeah, he's got an absolutely unique style. And what he's trying to say, I think, is very important for the time that we're alive. He's talking about consciousness. He's talking about the singularity. He's talking about all of the art from the past that has created this event. I really like the first episode where they're in the museum and the character is meditating upon all of these real-world paintings. You were telling me that he learned all that from art school, and he just kind of displayed what he was learning there. But, I don't think that's trivial. Especially the Magritte painting. They focus on the Magritte Magritte painting, the picture of the guy
The
in the
apple
bowler
one.
hat with the apple in front of him. Exactly.
Yeah.
Um,
And in the show, or in the what I don't know if you consider it a movie or a show, but he recut it into a movie at some point. He even
yeah.
sold VHS tapes of it. Like
I
like you can
actually,
get.
I did a whole podcast called "Fight for the Future" based upon a lot of Umami's interface, and I used that Magritte painting because it just got me thinking so hard about these concepts, and I needed to get it out. But yeah, he's really onto something uh, with his art style and his narrative that he's trying to unfold. There's a lot of Jungian elements into that show.
So for people who don't know, can we give sort of a blurb of what interface is about?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so Interface is a web series. It's animated by, like we said, Umami,
Hmm.
on YouTube, and it's about basically it all starts with the Philadelphia experiment, the sort of myth of the Philadelphia experiment, where
Yeah,
the U.S. government is trying to basically reveal. They're trying to create teleportation, right?
yeah.
And it goes horribly wrong, and the men who are on the ship that gets teleported are like fused to the hull of the ship, right? And except for one, who who's a character named Mischief, who there's I won't say too. It's a really hard show to explain because it doesn't explain itself.
Well, you know,
You really have to like.
I always thought that Henrik and Mischief were like the same person.
So my understanding is that Mischief, when he was an actual clown, like he worked in a circus,
Yeah.
and that he was in love with this like Harlequin woman, and they had like sort of a thing, but the sort of ringleader, the leader of the circus, also was in love with this Harlequin woman, and he basically sabotaged Mischief, and then the ringmaster and the ringleader and the Harlequin woman got together, and then their son is Henrik, and that's why Mischief
Oh, so that's
is
his
sort of
dad.
his dad was the ringleader, and Mischief feels Mischief feels a fondness for him because he's the son of his love, right?
Oh, damn.
He's not Mischief's son,
That's crazy.
but Mischief loved his mom, and so he sort of, I guess, wants to keep him safe, right? So anyways, the Philadelphia experiment happens. Mischief, who is a normal human at this point, he it's sort of nebulous, and I don't really know how to explain it. He becomes non-corporeal, right? Like he sort of gets blasted through infinity and becomes this magical creature, right? Who can like transform into anything. So in like the first episode, when he first meets Henrik, he transforms into a bus, and he says like, "I'm a bus, get on." And it's really comedic scene. But basically, Henrik is this guy who he was a photographer, I think, in the military. He was a photographer, and he was involved, I guess, in the Manhattan Project or something along those lines. And what happened was he like photographed a nuclear blast, and it created some sort of paradox where Henrik is actually stuck reliving the moment of his own death, right? So you'll notice Henrik is almost never without a cigarette, and that's because basically he's like stuck in a time loop of the moment of the blast. So he was smoking a cigarette while taking the photo. So he just has this cigarette that keeps respawning, right? And he doesn't age.
It's
And
kind
so
of cool.
his family all grows old and dies, and he's just still like a 50-year-old man. He doesn't look young, but for 120, like 100-year-old man, he looks pretty good, you know.
Yeah.
And so basically he meets Mischief in I think the streets of like Montreal or something, and they sort of go on this adventure. And what oh there's another thing. So the Philadelphia experiment, when it happened, this thing that the way I've heard it explained is you know it, the static, the static stuff, the static energy. You know what I'm talking about, Neirum?
Yeah, yeah, that
You
weird,
see it in the
yeah,
eyes
the
of the
black and white
mannequin.
static.
Yeah. So my understanding is that is spiritual energy, basically, and that it always existed, but after the Philadelphia experiment, it like revealed itself, right? So what the main plot is that Henrik basically like tried to kill himself and caused a family to die, uh, and or so he thinks, and but a baby survived that car crash.
Whoa.
They went off into a bridge, off a bridge into water. A baby survived that car crash, and that is like his great granddaughter. So the quest is like him and Mischief are trying to find Henrik's great granddaughter. And meanwhile, the villain is this company called Greetings Robot. I think Greetings Robotics, something like that. It's like Greetings Robotics or something. And basically, they're working on like technology that harnesses the spiritual energies, and they basically use it to create a thing called the interface. And what the interface is it's an artificial afterlife, basically.
I see. Yeah, they're trying to
Yeah.
create a another reality, I guess, to escape this place.
Right, and what it basically there's the sort of ending of interface is this whole, you probably remember it, but it's this whole question of like the owner of Greetings they make like a robot god named Cammy, but she never ends up really doing that much, at least not on screen. Um, but I guess she's like the sort of she's somehow related to the interface, but I just don't know how. But the owner of Greetings Robotics basically gives Henrik an ultimatum, right?
Yes.
And he says like, come into the interface. Your daughter and her daughter are here, and you can live with them forever, right? You can live in a perfect afterlife with your family who are already in the interface, right? And so Henrik basically he's in this lighthouse, and he has to like he's given this choice of to press a button, and if he presses it, he goes into the interface, and if he doesn't press it, he doesn't, right? And there's like the best line in the series in this episode where it's like Mischief says to Henrik, like, if you're something along the lines of, if your choice wasn't real, then neither was your loss, right? So he's saying this is where I think the real message is that he's trying to get out is like, there's these humans going into this fake paradise, right? And Henrik is being offered to go into this fake paradise, but it's fake, and so, you know, if he says no, he hasn't lost anything because nothing was on offer, right? Would it have even really been his family, or would it have been like an AI copy of them or something like that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. What would it even really be you? And how can you guarantee that you copied over each and every little facet of a human being into this interface?
And so basically Henrik decides not to enter the interface. He finds his granddaughter, and I
Yeah.
think they end on like a shot of there's like some really good imagery that I won't spoil, but what happens is we get like the last shot of Henrik at like a diner with his great granddaughter,
Hmm.
basically, and the sequel is even crazier, but it's not done yet.
I haven't
So
seen it. I haven't seen any of it.
we'll
And I'm
have
not.
to watch it.
Yeah, we
Hmm?
definitely need to do a watch party about it. And I'm
Yeah.
not even sure I finished all of Interface. I think I got busy with stuff, and he might have finished it, and I
What
didn't watch the last parts of it.
what I would say is, if you want to, if at some point we could even do it as a watch party together. Like we
Yeah,
could watch all of Interface, and then we could watch the current episodes of Safe Mode, which is the sequel. But really, what I would recommend is just watch the movie cut, because like I said, he took all the episodes, he cut out the intros and outros, he recut like all the music and stuff, and he just made one, he just turned it into one straight shot of a movie, and it's a feature length. Like I think he played it at film festivals, and I think if I was gonna recommend Interface to anybody, I would say watch it as a movie. Like watch the movie cut of it, because you'll have the best experience. Whereas he said he's doing the same thing with the sequel, where he's sort of releasing it he's releasing it as a web series, and then when the web series is done, he'll recut it into a movie. I won't say too much on the web series because I don't want to spoil it for you, Neirum, but what I will say is it takes place inside the interface.
Oh, dude.
Yeah, and what has and there's some sort of virus or glitch or there's something's wrong with the system, and so it had to enter safe mode, like your computer, right? It had to enter safe mode, and so the system's like glitching the fuck out. So like the textures on the buildings are all like moving around. You like be like a building with a million windows all spinning around it.
Yeah.
What's great about it is he said in an interview with some YouTuber, he said like he was excited for the idea because he could get real weird with the art, because it wasn't constricted by like physical rules, right? So he could draw whatever the shit he want, right? There's a really great line in there where the main character is this guy named Smear, and he's like the system administrator, and Smear is like talking to this young girl who's like they have sort of like almost like a sibling-esque kind of relationship, where they have sort of this like a banter back and forth, where she calls him Butthead because Mischief has two full heads fused together.
Yeah, he looks like a butthead.
Yeah, exactly. He's got like 3 noses, 4 eyes, like 2 mouths, right? And he has two heads that look like a butt. Like he's underneath his car, like fixing it one day in like the second episode, and Lana.
Hello, everyone.
He says like, "Why is your head a butt? Why do you have a butt for a head? Do you have to wipe it? Is that why they call you Smear?" And but well, so the inclination you get is that this is a kid who just does not like Smear, but then as you get further into the scene, you realize no, they're friends. This is like a thing they do, because she gave him the gift of like a sentient flower, and he names it Snooze Button, and it's just like this cute little flower that she gave him. She's like, you gotta water it every day, Smear. But there's a great scene in there where he's talking to Lana, and he's saying to her like, there are people out there who would seek to take real experience from you and give you manufactured memories.
Yeah, like the interface.
And yeah, exactly. And he says like, and you would never even know what you lost because you never knew you had an option in the first place, or something like that, right? And it's like, it's this like brilliant line, you know?
Well, it is, you know,
it
echoes the Matrix. It echoes this simulation theory that's being thrown around a lot.
Right.
It's a hellscape. Like when I hear people, I heard you guys talking about in the server today about simulation theory. I'm like, what a hellhole! Like, God, if that's true, Jesus, I hope not. But you know, you were talking about how do you prove it? How do you know? You can't. So for me personally, you know, the reason I didn't really pipe up and say anything is there's nothing to say. There's nothing to talk about. There's nothing to find out. If we are in a simulation like that, we can never have the tools necessary to test it, to know, to figure it out. Like, have you ever watched the movie Tron?
I saw the sequel, like, that came out.
Yeah.
In the 2000s,
like, the
but
people living in there had no idea that they were in a simulation until one of the creators, the programmers, they called them users. When one of the users came into the computer, that was the only way that they found out. They had no idea. No clue. How could you? Unless something from out there comes in here and literally tells you, like, yeah, I made your world. I'm a programmer, dude.
And I think, why would you ever want to go into a simulation, especially in the context of
Escape?
the world we live in, where it's like,
Fear.
well, like, do you want to go into a simulation that's owned by a billionaire? Do you want to do
No,
that? I don't
no,
trust that.
hell no.
You know, if Elon Musk comes out and says, we Tesla's developed a new artificial reality. You can download your brain into it. You can live there forever and do whatever. I don't trust that, right? Especially with the knowledge of the experience, the experiences you already have. Like just dreaming, right? Why would you ever want to go into a simulation when you could just learn how to lucid dream and it would be way more fulfilling? You know what I mean?
Right. Well, it's avoidance. It's all about avoiding what must be done. It's avoiding telling and unfolding the human story. It's cowardice at the core of it. Really. You know, and we're living in a world like that, man, where narcissism, fakeness, simulation, like you look at all these influencers on the internet, they are simulating something that is not genuine. It's not really who they are for, likes, a little dopamine rush, and a lot of cash to boot through ad revenue. I mean, we're living in that. I don't think we need to worry about if we're in something fake. We need to worry about how fake we are now.
I mean, yeah. I think that we're sort of it really does seem like we're in the lead up to the singularity, and that
It
it's
is.
probably going to come. If it's going to come at all, it'll be faster than we're expecting or that we're ready for.
Dude, I think
You
we've
know.
been in it since 2012. Like, I don't think McKenna was wrong about Time Wave Zero. I think we're in it. This is the singularity. We're in it. Like, and it's just getting faster and crazier and stranger. Look at how people behave. It's weird how people behave, man. It's strange. Like, everybody acts like they're so hard, like, they get into these debates, these conflicts. They really believe in their heart of hearts that it's life or death speaking to somebody on Discord or in a debate on YouTube. Meanwhile, no, it's not. Not at all. It's turned into sports. Are you familiar with kayfabe from wrestling?
Is that WWE or
Yes.
Raw or?
Yes.
Okay. No, but
So
I'm
so so
I
kayfabe
used
is, everybody knows wrestling is not actual violence, and it gets
right.
criticized for that. But I applaud it because those people are out there performing stunts, actually hurting themselves without the intention of hurting them or malice in their hearts. They're effectively playing. They're playing with each other and they're having such a good time. And not only that, they're telling a deep archetypical story. They have these things called faces and heels, which is
So
good and
a
evil.
face is like is a face like a face is a character who you're supposed to like, and a heel is a character you want to
Yes,
lose.
yeah, shit
Yeah.
heel
Yeah.
is the whole word, but people just say heel now. So yeah, you're
Baby face and shit
the
heels.
baby's face and the shit heels. And so
Right.
what happens often is the shit heel will turn a new leaf and become a face. They'll turn good because they integrated something in their storyline that turned them to the good side. Alternatively, faces can go through something in their storyline and cause resentment and a shadow that will cause them to turn evil. And I think that is so deep and interesting and important, but it's mocked because why? People want to see real violence. People want to see blood. They want to see death. They want to see hatred. They want to see malice played out on the television. And I think that is a huge part of why we're all so sick. It is a strange, strange thing to want to see that. Um, I don't get it. We have no reason in the world to feel that way towards each other, but we're still stuck in that. I don't know what you want to call it. Lower state of consciousness.
Yeah. See, I've often wondered about like the hypothetical of like what would heaven look like, and there's like this question for me of like, do we have violent video games in heaven? And my natural inclination is actually to say no. But then I also think of like all the fun I've had, playing Smash Brothers or like all these games with friends, and I think, well, if it wasn't real suffering, would it be that bad that it couldn't be there in heaven? Um, and it's still a conundrum. I question.
Well,
Uh,
I would say it's more like a holodeck. You can just materialize whatever you want in heaven and experience it and do it. And I also think that that's why there's another story of reincarnation, because there's all these stories in Hindu scripture talking about gods becoming so fucking bored with infinite power that they cut themselves up into 1,000 pieces and scatter themselves across space and time and have the other ones try and find it. Like they play a game of hide and seek. And the Hindus say that's what each and every human is a split up, divided God that's playing hide and seek with itself. Like, do you know that we're the same thing, or do you not? And it's fun for them. It's fun for the gods to play that game.
right, which would mean it's if this idea is correct. I mean, Alan Watts is where I've heard this idea before. Like his whole thing was basically explaining Eastern religion to a Western audience, right? But yeah, like it makes sense if you do like if you do the exploration of the idea of what if you were God, right? Like
Yeah.
you kind of imagine like, well, you could make a beautiful mountain, but wouldn't it be like way cooler if you had to climb the mountain, you know?
Well,
What
yeah.
and what if there was danger, you know?
Yeah. Think about playing a video game with cheat codes. How fast are you gonna get bored with that shit?
Right. It might be fun if you've like beaten the game and you just want to fool around for a couple minutes,
Sure.
but you don't want to play through the game itself with cheat codes, you know?
No, that's so boring. And then you got people in multiplayer that will use aimbots and cheat. Why is that fun for them? Well, that's a whole other thing. That's trolling. That's maliciousness. That's, like tying somebody down and torturing them. That's another weird thing. But again, I can't see the appeal of that. I don't understand that. Uh, and so we made these huge efforts to create anti-cheat things and match up the game files inside of your folder to make sure that you can't do that. The game will shut off now, because I believe deep down, even though we don't realize it in our lives, that's a sacred thing to keep the game fair.
Right. Um I almost wonder if cuz the way Alan Watts puts it is what you want is you want an adventure and you want a surprise. Like if you had a machine that you press a button and whatever you want you get, you'd eventually have to make a button that says surprise, right? But then also like you kind of want to go on an adventure. You want there to be dangers and risks, right? And honestly, like I mean, some people don't like the idea because they think it invalidates their suffering, right? Like, oh, this is just a game,
Yeah.
right? Which I can see that, but at the same time, it's like I can see this story being one of these dreams, right? And presumably, when we finish this one, like perhaps like Terrence McKenna talks about the transcendental object at the end of time. Do we when we get there, when we get to this transcendental object, do we stay with it forever, or have we made the transcendental object at the end of time an infinite number of times? We've always been making it's okay. This is an idea I've gotten into in like high dose psilocybin trips, where it's like it's like the funniest thing. I think it might be either the cosmic joke or like a part of the cosmic joke or like adjacent to the cosmic joke, but it's like it's like the story is always the same and we just do it differently every time, but it's always like the same archetypes and it's always the same, more or less the same story. Have you ever had that experience that like everything seems so familiar
Yeah, like
in
deja vu.
like deja vu, but it's like hilarious. because you're like, oh my God, it's the funniest joke, and it's the one we've been telling. It's the joke so funny we've been telling it for an eternity, and we will continue to tell it for eternity. Right?
Yes.
It's like this, and that's all you can say about it because you can't remember anything else as like in like normal consciousness. It's like, uh, here, I'll get back to this in a second. I need to go grab a snack. I'll
Yeah,
be right
go
back.
for it, bro. Yeah, there's this strange familiarity. I guess I'm just gonna riff by myself till it gets back. There's this strange familiarity, um, particularly when I've dived into psychedelics. When you get into a certain point of the trip, particularly with mushrooms for me, it feels like I'm coming home. Like it's just a very familiar feeling, like I'm walking into my parents' house. You know, after I haven't been home to see them in a while or something like that. I think that there's a lot of things that we've done consistently throughout human history that's probably built into our DNA epigenetically, trying to reach out and call to us when we enter some of these states of mind. Uh, and deja vu is a very strange thing. I guess I guess the deja vu comes from living in a world and everything kind of looks similar. One McDonald's looks like everything else. Uh, I wonder how often people experience deja vu 500 years ago when you would go to another town or experience another culture somewhere. Things were wildly different and they weren't as homogenized. Anyway, I was
Okay.
just riffing with myself until you got back, bro.
Yeah.
Didn't want to
Got some
keep a bunch of dead space if somebody was
dead
listening.
air, you know.
So yeah, continue
But
with
no,
what you were
it's
saying
like,
about deja vu.
oh, it's like there's this cosmic joke, and depending on how you interact with it, it can either be terrifying or it can be the best thing ever, right?
Yeah,
And the way that it becomes terrifying is like you realize like, oh, this life I'm living now, this is the role I always play in the story,
right.
right? This this is the part of God that I am, and I'm the part of God, and these are all the struggles that I go through, and these are all the ways I've suffered. And it's like when we finish this one, we're gonna do another one, and everyone will be in the same part. They'll be a different character, but they'll be in the same part of the story that they're always in, right? Do you get what I'm saying?
Yes.
And so it's like it can be a horrifying thing when you this idea that you realize like, oh my God, every bad thing I've ever experienced, in some way I'm gonna have to do it again, again, again for infinity, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the part where it's the best thing ever is when you like remember, when you like vaguely start to remember like how this actually plays out, right? And the reality is we're not at the good part yet because there's a good part coming. That's like the craziest thing. It's like this big epic like adventure where like we get, you know, do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, as we continue throughout time and become more technologically sophisticated, knowledgeable, understand the context of our past, we unlock greater and greater challenges. I don't think we're quite there yet. Our culture is too fucked up to really focus on something like that. You have all kinds of people doing different things. Most of the economy is dedicated to distractions, video games, movies, uh, things like that. You know, YouTube videos involving arguing and hatred, malice, not really trying to bridge a gap or communicate. People want to fight and then say, "What do you all think about it?" You know, and then I get that debate has its place, but honestly, an earnest conversation, like what I appreciated, it's Terrence
What?
McKenna's trilogues. He would get multiple people in there to have a conversation about something. Same with Joe Rogan. That's what Joe Rogan's superpower is he doesn't sit down and argue and debate. He has a conversation with you. He listens. You listen. You come to some conclusions. You can even come up with some solutions. Uh, that is a far better way of opening up the future than what we're doing now.
Well, I think the fact that it's so bad right now is the indication that we are approaching the end game, right?
Yeah.
Like it can only get so bad before people say, "Well, what the fuck is this? I'm not putting up with this anymore."
No, yeah, I'm not putting up with. I don't do it. I used to debate people. I used to be in debate club in college until I realized hanging out in the pavilion on my campus, smoking a cigarette with people and just talking, resulted in far more than I ever got out of debate club. Like that just puts you into war mode. You're not listening. You're waiting on your turn to speak. And you're writing down all these things and creating these weapons of words to attack the other person to make him look stupid. So you change everybody else's mind. It's all manipulation. There's not any earnestness in it. Uh, and, we just need another tool set. I'm not saying we need to stop debating or anything, but you know how enlightening it would be to have politicians sit down at a podcast like Joe Rogan's podcast and just talk? And then Joe Rogan be like, yeah, but you sound like you're full of shit and you're not really being real right here. And everybody in the comments is saying that you're fake as fuck. Could you try to be real here with us? Dude,
Right.
that would be so refreshing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that really the whole sort of political system that even the free parts of the world are in is still trash, right?
Yes.
Like, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'll take Canada over living in China any day. It's not a hard choice. But like North America still has its bullshit, right? I mean, ultimately the rich get theirs at the expense of the average person and the poor person, you know?
Yeah.
We have people living in such excess wealth. And when you see these politicians, you can be reasonably certain that whoever gets in, they're going to pass legislation that benefits the rich as their focus, and then maybe they'll throw a couple bones to the average man, just so that they don't get too angsty.
Yeah. Well, you got to look at
But
what the path rich people have to take to get there. Um, some of them are very nice people. They're really kind. They started their own business themselves, and they worked from the ground up to create something unique. But most rich people, are thoroughly narcissistic people that have such a hyperinflated ego and sort of barrel their way through culture to get people to just agree with whatever they're saying. By being the loudest voice in the room, or being, unwavering, putting out that sense of confidence, even though there's nothing really there to back it up except it's a bluff. So bluffs are most of what make up these super rich people. If you sit down and you really try to hang out and talk with them, there's not a lot there behind them except I want to make money, I want to make money, I want to make money. I enjoyed listening to the Wolf of Wall Street guy's podcast. I'm trying to remember his name.
like the real one.
Yeah, the real one
The
that
real,
went to jail and everything, and he got out, and he's like a different guy, and he's just talking earnestly about why he did what he did, what the motivations were, what it took to get to that next level. And he's just one of the guys that got caught. He talks about all of them do this. And then he tries to make financial videos to help people make money in an ethical way. And I think that's wonderful. Jordan Belfort, that's his name, Jordan Belfort.
Right.
That kind of energy is what we need. Uh, and not a lot of people, change a new leaf after they go to jail. There's plenty of people that come right out of jail and continue doing the same crimes over and over and over. And, there are differences between violent crimes and these white collar crimes of like stealing money or, just being super ruthless and whatnot. But there's a reflection of that in social media. The very most popular people on social media are raging narcissists. They're not really. If you sat down with them and had a conversation, there's not a whole lot there except argument and debating, and I'm right and you're wrong. Very few people. The most unpopular YouTube channels are where there's genuine conversation, a genuine feeling of, what is going on? Let's explore it here together. One example that is mainstream somehow is Theo Vaughn. Have you ever watched Theo Vaughn?
I've seen a clip or two. Yeah.
Well, Theo Vaughn is just allows himself to be vulnerable on the camera, and I think that's a big part of his fame. Why doesn't that carry across to many other people that are being genuine? I don't know. Maybe it's because he's a comedian. Maybe because he's always cracking jokes, and he's constantly juggling and entertaining you just to keep you on the video, And if that's what it takes to get people to listen to you, I mean, we're in a lot of trouble. We're in a whole lot of trouble if that's what it takes. But that might be what it is with that guy.
Well, have you ever heard of the Kali Yuga?
Yeah.
So, like, my understanding is, like, you have the Kali Yuga, and that's, like, the age of darkness, where, like, debauchery and evil sort of take root and become the controlling force of the world, right? And then, I guess the next Yuga, because I think a Yuga is, like, a period of time or something. It's like an age. The next Yuga, then, is, like, the Golden Age, right?
Yes.
And so maybe that's what it is. It's gonna keep getting worse until there's just this moment where the true heart of the Godhead in everyone, speaks out and says, we're not gonna put up with this anymore, and we are gonna make the world a beautiful place, whether you like it or not. I almost like the idea of, like, if you can imagine, in the same way that war is used as a verb, like to war with someone or to start a war, right? Imagine peace as a verb. I declare peace on you, sir.
Yeah, dude. Like that's a really good idea. Like, what is it? I mean, okay, let me deconstruct this. Let me really think about it. If you declare peace on someone, then that probably signals to them that you're not capable of violence, and that would probably lead to them coming and invading you. So the only way you could really declare peace on someone is, I guess, if you had like a nuclear weapon, or you had some advantage over them to where when you're trying to be nice and then they try to take advantage of that, you can destroy them, and let them know that, and have that. Like, okay, here's a perfect example. The duel between Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi. When Obi-Wan says, Anakin, I've got the high ground, it's over. It's over, man. Don't do this. I love you, man. Don't do it. And what's Anakin do? He does a fancy little somersault in the air, and he gets his arms and legs cut off and falls in the lava. And he gets burst into flames. I don't know how else you can deal with that unless you have the high ground. And that's the justification between all of the military spending of every country in the world. And what's interesting about the nuclear bomb is we really haven't fought with each other at all since then. The wars and fighting that we have are people that don't have nuclear bombs. So if we really want to talk about world peace, everybody needs to have a nuke, I guess. So we're
I'll,
so afraid of each other that we don't do anything.
I have an alternative solution,
Yeah.
right? Imagine it. Let me tell it in the form of a parable, right?
Hmm.
So let's say China's at war with the U.S. and you know these two soldiers from each side of the conflict, like sort of get separated from their unit, and like sort of meet each other and like because there's no one else around, they like decide, okay, we're not gonna shoot, and they find a way to communicate, and they say to each other, what if we just didn't, right? And then what if they went back to their unit and they said, what if we just didn't, right? And what if
Yeah.
the whole army just said, what if we just didn't, right? And then now, no matter what, no matter what the emperor says of whatever nation, right? It's like, well, he doesn't have an army because no one wants to fight,
Yeah. Well, I mean, the
and
hope
that's
is that the other army would do the same thing. If they don't, then they're not going to have a home to come back to. And I really think that, the introduction of psychedelics during the Vietnam War went a long way to have people start dodging the draft. They were like, I'm not going in the military. I'm not going to go kill some people on the other side of the earth. I'm not doing that. Uh, so effectively, I think what you're saying has already happened. And I think that's a great thing.
yeah. So there's a thing my friend and I just sort of started to call the Scatman Enigma.
Yeah.
So you know Scatman John. I may have told you this story before, but I'll tell it again for the sake of the
Okay.
podcast. So the Scatman Enigma. So do you know who Scatman John was?
No.
Scatman John was like a failed jazz musician. Like he tried to be a jazz musician and it never really took off for him. But he had stuttered all his life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when he got into jazz, he found out about scat, right? And what he found was that not in spite of his stutter, but actually because of his stutter, he could like utilize his stutter to scat really well. So scat is like a thing you know what that is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shooby dooby doo wop
So
bop. Da 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 pop.
I
Yeah.
can't even. Yeah, he's like if you see him do it, he's crazy.
Well, it's effectively glossolalia, like speaking in tongues in a
Right,
musical way.
right. And so it all loops back.
Yeah.
It all roads lead to the mushroom.
All roads lead to the mushroom and speaking in tongues.
Right. Yeah. And so basically, he made one moment, one moment.
I mean, if you ever speak in tongues at length, and I'm talking like longer than 5 minutes, it feels like you're getting a brain massage. You feel like an absolute fool. Like, don't get me wrong, it's ridiculous. But it like lights up all these different circuits in your mind to where you start to have a strange little psychedelic experience. It's just hitting all these little wires and neurons in your head and lighting your whole brain up. It is a very
So
strange thing to experience.
so he became this. He started performing under the name Scatman,
Hmm.
right? And if you were on YouTube in like like the late 2000s, early 2010s, it was a big meme, right? You had really it was these two main songs. It was Scatman's World and I'm a Scatman. And I'm a Scatman's like, I'm a Scatman, and but like listen to some of these lyrics. Uh, I'll do I'm a Scatman first because that's the one I'm less interested in. But the Scatman's World is the one that the Scatman Enigma is all about, right?
Yeah.
So he says, everybody stutters one way or the other, so check out my message to you. As a matter of fact, don't let it, nothing hold you back. If the Scatman can do it, so can you. Everybody's saying that the Scatman stutters, but doesn't ever stutter when he sings. But you know what you don't know, I'm going to tell you right now that the stutter and the scat is the same thing. I'm the Scatman. Um, why should we be pleasing any politician heathens who would try to change the seasons if they could? The state of the condition insults my intuition, and it only makes me crazy in a heart like wood. Uh, and I think that I oh and here's oh, is there any more? No, that this is the last one. Um, I hear you all ask about the meaning of scat. Well, I'm the professor, and all I can tell you is, while you're still sleeping, saints are still weeping, 'cause things you call dead haven't yet had the chance to be born.
Whoa, dude, that's heavy.
Right, you know? And so, this song, Scatman's World, is the other one. And just to preface this, this was like a big meme. So people my age pretty much all have at least quite a lot of people my age saw this on YouTube as a kid, right? It was a song from the 90s. It comes from an album called Scatman's World, right?
Yeah.
And uh, the album is like a concept album talking about like this hypothetical perfect world, right? And it has an opening track, like an intro. You know, sometimes albums will have like a song that's not really a full song; it's just sort of an intro to the whole album.
Right.
This is that sort of thing. And the lyrics go, imagine a land of love where people have time to care, where everybody's equal and we all tell the truth. If you're wondering where this magical place is, you don't have to look too far. You'll find it between your deepest dreams and warmest wishes, right?
Yeah, man.
So the
Exactly.
title track the title track of this album is called Scatman's World, and here's what happened. I had a heroic dose, and
Yeah.
I started to get the pre-flight anxiety. So like I always do, I went on YouTube, which I don't recommend to anyone. I've just been particularly lucky every time that's happened to me, and it popped up in my feed, Scatman's World, which I hadn't listened to, probably for 10 years. Right, there was no good reason why it would end up in my feed at that moment in time, but it did, right? And so I listened to it, right? And it's first off, it's a really catchy song, but not like in an earworm kind of way. Like it's an unironically pretty beautiful melody, right? It goes like I can't really, I'm not gonna sing it, but you should check it out
Yeah.
when you can.
Well, now that you're saying
But
it, I know who you're talking about. I've heard that
oh
before.
yeah,
Um, yeah, I just didn't remember it first. I've heard those songs and that guy. I've probably even listened to Scatman's World years ago.
yeah. So well, there's also here's the thing. It was the music video, and the music video is like it has all these filters on the color. Where you know how people say when you're a kid, colors seem warmer and brighter, and then as you become an adult, they sort of get dulled down, and you don't really notice until you take like a psychedelic, and you see the vibrant colors as they used to be. Do you know that?
Yeah.
That what have you ever heard? Well, this video has like filters on it that sort of emulate that sort of that sort of like heavenly kind of colors that we saw as kids, right? So,
Right.
but also they do color swapping. So there's like scenes of kids like skateboarding in a skate park surrounded by blue grass and a purple sky, right? And there's these like zoom ins over like earth, but there's a black sky and like orange ground, right? It's like really, it's already a lot, right? So keep in mind, like heroic dose on a heroic dose, it's like, oh my god, right? And I'm just gonna read the lyrics and I'll tell you what the Scatman Enigma is, right?
Okay.
So he does a little scat thing at the beginning. He goes, "I'm calling out from Scatland. I'm calling out from Scatman's world. If you want to break, this is the interesting part.
Yeah.
If you want to break free, you better listen to me. You've got to learn how to see in your fantasy." Which sort of gets back to the Hindu thing you were talking about earlier,
Yeah.
right? This is the fantasy of God, and we've got to learn. And Scatman is saying we've got to learn how to see properly in it.
Yes.
Um,
It's the highest aim that we have is, the gods and goddesses, or, like today, God and the angels and things like that. It it's necessary for human beings to have a target to aim at. Because we have this shoulder and this arm that's capable of throwing spears and rocks and using slingshots to take down giants in our ancient stories. So if we don't have an aim, which I believe in our society today, we do not have an aim. We're aimless and rudderless because people can't believe in the religions today. People can't believe that any politician is telling them the truth. People can't believe that they can do all of these things these influencers do because there's a fakeness to it. There's a disingenuous vibe that everybody kind of feels with their heart. But they've blown up this bridge between the heart and the mind to where they can't acknowledge it. They have to take antidepressants, smoke a bunch of weed. They have to drink a lot of alcohol. They have to get into ketamine now. Ketamine is a huge drug right now because look at the generation. The generation are the masters of disassociation and apathy. What is ketamine? It's a dissociative. It's a horse tranquilizer. And that is the biggest drug out there in parties, concerts, raves, you name it. People literally want to check out of their body rather than unfold their own story. So it's again like they're wanting to jump into this fucking simulation, into this interface, get into this
Right.
K-hole, and forget about it. And what do when they wake up the next day? They can't wait to get that other fix. They can't wait to forget. They can't wait to get on their video game. They can't wait to get on Discord and talk shit all day long and feel like there's somebody. That's where the
So
conflict comes from. I think that's where all this conflict comes from. People don't feel worthy because we don't have rituals. We don't have coming of age rituals. We don't have any indicator that you're a man or you're a woman. So we have to constantly prove it, and it's
so I
destroying
just
us.
I just read the chorus, which starts with the chorus. Now I'm gonna read to you the two verses, and they're both really good. So the first verse goes, "Everybody's talking something very shocking, just to keep on blocking what they're feeling inside. But listen to me, brother, you just keep on walking, 'cause you and me and sister ain't got nothing to hide. Scat man, fat man, black and white and brown man, tell me about the color of your soul. If part of your solution isn't ending the pollution, then I don't want to hear your stories told. I want to welcome you to Scatman's world." And the second verse goes, "Everybody's born to compete as he chooses, but how can someone win if winning means that someone loses? I sit and see and wonder what it's like to be in touch. No wonder all my brothers and my sisters need a crutch. I want to be a human being, not a human doing. I couldn't keep that pace up if I tried. The source of my intention really isn't crime prevention. My intention is prevention of the lie. Yeah, welcome to that Scatman's world."
That's his world. That's his narrative that he's spinning. He's trying to. It's interesting that he went into such a prose with his lyrics. He's not wanting to fuck around. He's trying to get his message across right here and now, and then mix it up with some nice music and scatting. He really had something to
Right.
say. He really had something he was trying
Yeah.
to get across and
So
convey to people.
what the Scatman Enigma was is I had this experience where I'm on a heroic dose and I'm watching this music video, and something just anything to him about it. I just said, um, "Okay, watch this." And so like we had this whole discussion about it. He was convinced Scatman was God for like a couple weeks. Like he
Oh,
felt like
dude,
Scatman
he really
was like
dissolved
had
his
like
walls. Yeah, he really,
right.
yeah, too much
Though
maybe.
he was like, but 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 no, like the thing we were sort of convinced of by the end of the whole discussion was that Scatman was tapped in. He was here to bring a message. He was here to tell us something, right? And it's and the thing he was here to tell us the was the very literal interpretation of his music. And that's sort of what the conclusion we came to basically. So that's what we just called it the Scatman Enigma,
Yeah,
right?
dude. What's this guy just laying it all on the line? He's just out there up front saying it. I think to segue a little bit. Somebody that reminds me of what you're saying is the comedian Bill Hicks. I really enjoy his material because you know it's funny what he's saying, but dude, it's also deeply profound. Uh, like he talks about this. He talks about a young man on acid thinks he can
Uh,
fly, so he gets up on top of a building and jumps off. Great, we lost a moron. We lost a moron. If you thought you could fly, why didn't you take off from the ground? And I'm like, dude, that's a great point, and it's funny because we're surrounded by people that do that. We're surrounded by people that do that. They say, "Yeah, get up here. We're gonna take off from the building and splat." And I think that's largely where we're at culturally. A lot of people are told you got to do this, this, and this to fly. Meanwhile, that's not even true. We're not even oriented in the correct way to open up any kind of meaningful, positive future. So you get all these people like lemmings just falling off of buildings, like they'll go to college, they'll get a degree, they'll get out, they find no job. The market's not there. Nobody told them to research it. Nobody told them that. They just said, you got to go to school, you got to do that. It's expected that you know the whole thing as a 55-year-old and you can look back in time and make every single correct decision. There's so many missing pieces to what is required to put together a meaningful life. Like in the 50s, in the 1950s, there were videos upon videos upon videos made for high school teaching you how to fold your clothes, iron, balance a checkbook, do all of this extremely useful stuff. Why did that stop? Why did that stop? I don't know.
right. I mean, the other thing is, like what's the most probably safe thing you could probably take in university is probably either like a tech stuff, uh, like like technology degrees,
Mm-hmm.
or business, right? And business is like probably the sort of definition of like a soul crushing job.
Yeah. I mean, think
What's your
about think
job?
yeah, think about what
Oh,
you're doing
I'm
all
an
day long.
I'm an like imagine being the guy who's the advertising consultant for Sham Wow.
Yes.
His whole career is about selling bullshit,
Uh,
right?
have you ever watched Mad Men? That's exactly what it's about. It's about this man that is the head of an advertising firm, and throughout the process, you see what the fakeness of all of that does to this guy after a while. It is a soul crushing job because
TV show?
it's called Mad Men.
Is it a show or a movie?
It's a show.
2007.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I heard it.
Cause
I'm sorry.
deep in his heart, I think this guy is like a hippie, but he has this clean cut hair. He's freshly shaven every day. He wears a suit and a tie. He stands up straight. He talks with a deep voice and says as few words as possible. But deep down inside, this guy is wanting more out of life. He's wanting fun, love, sunshine, adventure, and he's just not finding it in that. And it shows other characters in the show. They're not finding that either. They're not even finding it in their own marriages. They're not finding that joy with their own children because there is this terrible disconnect with what we're all participating in and doing and what lives inside of our hearts. I'm not saying everybody needs to go be a hippie and bang everybody in orgies and whatnot. No, I'm just saying the desire to do that is a symptom of something much deeper that should be addressed.
Well, yeah, look, I do think the whole polyamory thing doesn't necessarily seem to work,
It
to be
doesn't.
honest.
Yeah, people get mad, jealous. Whose kid is whose? Who has the final say on how to deal with the children? Are you gonna have a fucking committee meeting? Like, are you gonna vote on how to discipline? Like, are you? So you've created a government inside your house. Like, I mean, if that
Well,
works,
also,
great. But like, I don't know if that's how that works. You know?
and here's the reality, right? Is there's always some connection that's stronger, you know?
Yeah.
Uh,
You like somebody.
so if
Yeah.
you
Everybody has their favorites.
right, so and so these people who do that, who engage in that sort of dynamic, maybe they have someone who they don't mind messing around with, but like they're not their favorite, and then the person who is their favorite, they're not that person's favorite, right? So it's like this chain of like
Right.
It's like a dominance
Unrequited
hierarchy.
love all around.
Right. Yeah.
And what do you do about that?
Um.
For rocket ships, but we need to talk about it. What do we do? How do
Well,
you
yeah.
approach this?
It's like a 40 to 50% of first marriages fail, and 60 to 67% also fail.
Yeah, and another part of it is we live.
At least in the states.
Another problem is we live 3 times longer. By the time somebody might think about getting divorced to somebody, you're usually dead or dying. So now we live 3 times longer, and we're like, well, that third of my life is over, and I'm going to divorce this person and see what the second third of my life is with somebody else. Can you fix that? Can you check? I don't know. I don't know. It's an unforeseen consequence of being healthier, having abundance of food, medical technology, and knowledge of knowing what bacteria is to wash our hands, and we live so much longer. The old institutions of civilization did not account for that. They were like, yeah, you might make it to 30. So this stuff that we have is going to work until you're 30. What can we install? What update can we give human culture to facilitate that to 90? I don't know. I
Well,
don't
the other thing is, I think a big part of why so many people get divorced is just that they're fucking stressed out, and that builds this sort of angst between people and their partners, and they're stressed out because they're doing bullshit work for bullshit pay,
right.
right? What is it? You just heard that song "Rich Men
Oh
North of
yeah,
Richmond"?
he's from where I live. Yeah, yeah, I know that guy
Oh
very
yeah,
well. Yeah.
like you have you met him?
Oh
You
no,
know him?
no. We're just
Oh,
from the
okay,
same
okay,
mountain range.
right. Yeah, but he has that line, overtime hours for bullshit pay.
Yeah. And you got to pay
Um,
all these taxes to people to buy their bags of fudge rounds. So
yeah.
how do you inspire men to work when so much of your money is going to people that will never work? That's why there's a lot of people that don't work anymore, man.
Well,
Like the
I
the
think
great resignation, is that what they called it a few years ago, or the quiet quitting?
right.
They had multiple words, terms for it. Men are checking
Well,
out
see,
at an
I
exponential rate.
I think the thing is, and I think here's the reality that a lot of people don't want to face is that people want to work. They just want to do work that is fulfilling,
Yes.
right? You don't often hear about farmers quitting their job. You
No.
know, doctors don't just quit their job. Someone fucking working at a company, either as an internship or as an actual employee, and is just the most bullshit shit they got to do. I mean, like that's the thing. Like I'm actually I don't see the great resignation as an entirely bad thing,
No,
right?
I call it the great renegotiation, because
Right.
a lot, like at my job and a lot of the jobs that my friends worked, like they gave us raises out of nowhere. They gave us extra paid vacation out of nowhere. They gave us extra stock options. They gave us all this extra stuff because they were like, oh shit, people are not taking this anymore. We have to sweeten the pot to keep these people. And even then,
Well,
it
that's
just wasn't enough.
what was it you did there?
I worked in IT for a while.
Oh, I see. I
Yeah.
see. Yeah. Oh my god, my mom was always telling me I should do that, and I'm just like, no, it's a bullshit job.
Yeah, it's good money,
Um,
but it's
yeah.
meaningless. I mean, what effectively I
It's
was doing was assisting the human population in distracting and brainwashing themselves. And that's their free will. That's what they want to do. But to me, it just gave me a bad taste in my mouth.
yeah. I mean, honestly,
Because I worked in a
I,
particular field that I won't reveal, where I was directly assisting that part of it,
what
and
part of what?
of the distraction machine, of the
I see.
just the bullshit, that's not
Right.
the continuation of conflict and taking and anyway, when
Yeah,
you
I get you.
understand where most information technology comes from, it comes from child labor. Child labor.
What do you mean?
Like the most of the devices, phones, things like
Oh,
that,
I see.
comes
Yeah.
from Chinese child labor. For whatever reason, Android devices are not cool because they're built by competent adults. People want the devices created by child slavery. There's literal blood, sweat, and child tears in these devices that these people use, and they have no problem at all with it, none at all. Yet
um,
at the same time, we have like this war on drugs. Why? Well, because it does child trafficking and it hurts people, it kills people. Okay, why don't you apply that to technology? Why don't you get ethically sourced technology? I don't know. Nobody
well, I
cares.
always get an Android. I always get
Yeah.
Androids because the thing about Apple is there's several companies. There's a lot of companies that have particular like reputations and as brands in terms of the culture, and those companies are able to charge more than their products actually were. Like you should have seen this whole thing about the new Apple MacBook, right? Where they were like where they had this bullshit. I mean, you worked in IT, so you'll know it's bullshit right when I say it. But basically, they had this presentation where they were presenting the new MacBook, and they said like it's got 4 GB. I don't know if it was presentation or if it was like Twitter, but it was revealed that this like $2,000 MacBook had 4 GB of RAM or like 8 GB of RAM, like a low amount of RAM for a modern computer, right? And like people were upset that like they were overcharging for such low specs, and they literally had a guy like say like, "Well, you don't understand because of the optimization uh, of our systems. That 4 GB is actually more like actually is like 8 GB on another system." It's like
What a bunch of
that
bullshit.
that does how stupid do you think we are?
I mean,
Like
they're
that's not
selling
how
them.
computers work.
They're selling them.
Right? Well, that's the
People
thing.
people are
Because
unaware.
if you want to be a cool hipster hanging out in a coffee shop writing your movie script, you can't be writing it on a fucking Lenovo. You got to have that nice MacBook, you
Yeah.
know? And so that's the thing about Apple. They've managed to very expertly create this sense of like
A brand.
uh yeah,
Yeah.
people are willing to pay way more for an iPhone when they could get an Android of the same specs for like you know like half the price. Like an iPhone is like fucking $600. What the fuck? You
Yeah.
know? Every time there's like the other thing is there's been tons of like developments in glass that have led to companies being able to make sturdier and sturdier glass. Every time they've done that, what does Apple do? They make the screen thinner so that it still breaks all the time, so that people still have to buy more iPhones.
Yeah, it's
You
planned
know?
obsolescence.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I can't get too I it used to upset me about people just feeding the beast like that, but now I'm like more curious of why? Why? Why
Well,
are you doing this? Why are you feeding this monster that devours children in a factory for what? Exactly. For what? Exactly. I don't know. To be cool,
well,
to stay loyal to a brand that doesn't care about you. I don't know.
to some degree, you do basically need a device in the modern world, right? Because if you don't have a phone, how are you going to get a job? How are they going to contact you if they want to hire you? No one's got a landline anymore, right? And what do you do if they call and you're out getting milk from the gas station? So it's like when people talk about climate change and they say like it's like, oh, humans should be wiped out, right? When we destroyed the planet. What do you mean we? The average person's hands are tied as far as carbon goes. And the people who actually are in a position of power to do something about the issue also don't care and have a lot to gain from doing nothing.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like at a certain point the average person's alone, their hands are tied, and you can't expect them to go on a suicide jihad to save the world because
No.
they know they're just going to die and it's not going to achieve anything, you know?
Well, you're just
And I
gonna
mean,
hurt innocent people too because
no, I don't
this.
mean a literal suicide jihad. I mean
Well,
like
it's like that's the story of the Unabomber. It's exactly why he went on that crusade, blowing stuff up because he was terrified of what computers, technology, and social media were going to do to people. And he was right. He didn't go about it correctly because I think he would have got a lot further by writing a book. He wrote a manifesto, but that was only released after he did all his wackadoodle stuff. If he would have wrote a book and just entered into public discourse, we might be in a very different place because he was a very intelligent man. I can't say that he's not, but yeah, you can't go around doing that because everybody's gonna fight you, and then anytime you bring up what we're talking about, they're gonna think you're the Unabomber or you're crazy or like, what are you gonna do about it? It's like, well, nothing. I'm just talking about it, man. I'm just trying to
right.
figure it out.
um yeah, we've been going for quite a while. Do you have I got a little bit more in me, but do you have
Dude,
any ideas?
I could go on, but yeah, we can wrap it up, bro. You got any
Oh no,
closing statements?
I think I have not a closing statement. I have like one more topic I think we should touch on, right?
Okay, well, hey, we can keep going and going. I'm gonna get myself another drink real quick though, and keep it going. Okay,
Okay.
I'll be right back.
I'll go get some. Okay. I wonder what he's going to get to drink. Maybe a Budweiser? Maybe a whiskey on the rocks? Maybe a some watered down chartreuse. What is he going to get? Who knows? I hope he gets back soon.
All right, bro, I'm back.
Okay, give me a moment to go get a glass of water, another can of pears.
Yeah, dude, go for it.
I did, I tried to keep the dead air away, but I didn't do a very good
Nah,
job.
dude,
I just said like,
it happens. People can fast forward
yeah,
through it.
yeah. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Hello.
Hey, what's up, man?
Okay, so yeah, I just have a couple more topics I'd like to cover.
Yeah, go
Uh,
for
I got to eat more canned fruit because apparently it's great.
it. Yeah, fruit is good for you.
Uh, so, um, did you play any video games as a kid?
Yeah, I mean, I'm old, so I play the Super Nintendo and
Right.
yeah, Super Mario, all that type of stuff. And then as I got older, uh, Quake 2 came out,
Oh hell yeah.
and that was my first proper computer video game, and I loved it. I love the music in it. That music got me going. The first time I played that game is back in the 90s. They had these computer stores. You would walk into it, they have all these computers set up. You could sit down and play a game and test it out and see how smooth it runs and then pick it up and buy it. So when I was a kid, my dad took me into a Gateway store. This little logo with a cow in the shape of a box. I didn't get it, but it's this cow store is what I called it, and they had all these computers in there, and I sat up there, and my dad was talking to the guy at the counter about computers, and I was playing this game, Quake, and just blasting cyborgs, listening to heavy metal, blowing things up, throwing grenades. And my dad came over there. He's just like bobbing his head, like that sounds pretty good. Whoa, you blew that guy up. That's pretty cool. Like it mesmerized him. He's like, whoa, what is this? This is cool. Because he grew up through the first part of the century without seeing anything like that, and
Right.
as soon as he heard the heavy metal and saw the graphics, he's like, "We're taking this one home." And so that was the beginning of my PC Master Race arc. I never got a console again because I got into modding and programming, and
Oh my God.
that was the
Yeah.
beginning for me. Quake 2.
Really, I think PC is objectively the best platform for gaming
Mm-hmm.
because if you have a PC, you just have access to no, I wouldn't even call them bells and whistles. It's like you have access to modding, but also
Well,
just straight up game development, you
think
know?
about yeah,
You can't
exactly. Think about it like this: you're playing the game on the same instrument that it was created on.
Right, right. No one makes a PS4 game on a PS4, you
No,
know?
they use
Um
computers.
right. Well, that's I think the thing is that uh the nice thing about a computer is when you invest in a decent gaming rig, you've made you've made you've made a machine capable of making art,
Yes.
right? So not only do you get a cool place to play, you get a cool place to express yourself, right? If you want to get into digital painting and drawing, or if you want to get into um, like 3D art. And the nice thing about 3D art is you can if you have Skyrim, you can install the official modding suite and you can make your own sword for Skyrim,
Yes.
like, and that's the thing you just can't do on a console,
No. No. I mean, have you
so
ever played Skyrim heavily modded? It is a whole other
oh hell
game.
yeah.
It is.
Yeah,
I mean, they're still making mods for it, man. Still,
yeah.
and I still play it.
Well, that's why all of Bethesda's open world RPGs, Morrowind, Oblivion, Skyrim, Fallout 3, Fallout New Vegas, Fallout 4, all those games still sell today when they go on sale because people know, well, if I buy this, I don't just get the one game, I get the one game with so much variety. I can install mod packs, I can do a whole
Yeah,
bunch of different runs
it's
of
a
the game and they'll
landmark.
all be different. Yeah.
Like
Um
same with Super Mario. People still play fucking Super Mario, man. Like on an emulator or Sonic the
oh yeah.
Hedgehog. People still play these landmark games.
Well,
Um,
in
and
particular,
Quake 2 came out when the RTX card did. They RTX'd Quake 2 and it got a resurgence.
yeah. I mean, listen, like even it's more of a complicated process when to there's what they call ROM hacks, where you take the ROM of a game
Mm-hmm.
and you basically use reverse engineering to modify the files. It's a lot more complicated than, say, modding a Bethesda game, because Bethesda has official tools that they themselves release for modding. This involves reverse engineering, like binary and
Yes.
stuff like that, right? I don't know how to do it. If anyone knows more about this and I'm fucking it up, the explanation of, like, I'm sorry,
No, you're
but
doing great.
like but people, like, you should see the stuff that you like on the Nintendo 64. They had Mario 64, the first 3D Mario game. That the modding scene for that game is ridiculous. Like, people have made entire sequels that are as long and as creative and as fun as Mario, the original Mario
Yes.
64.
I,
People have done crazy shit with that game. Ocarina of Time, uh, there was a whole project where a group of programmers and like modders, they basically created a program. What it is you provide your own ROM of Ocarina of Time, and then they have a program. You use their program. You put in your ROM into the program, and what it does is it decompiles all of the code of Ocarina of Time into readable, I think C++, presumably. It might be C. But like it decompiles the game into readable game code that you can do anything with. So now people have made like HD Ocarina of Time. People have made like their entirely own games. People have made like their own Zelda games with all their own levels and new items and dungeons and bosses. And it's
yeah.
only really just getting started, right? So, I think PC is the way to go.
Well, yeah.
Um,
But, it's again like that Apple versus Android argument. Most people don't want to get into that shit. They just want to turn on something, have a ergonomic controller in their hands, and play the game and, go to sleep. And that's fine. That's what people want to do. But yeah, for those of you that want to take a deep dive and figure out what is underneath the veil of these games that mesmerize us all day long, it's infinitely rewarding. As Skyrim is evidence of. We're still making these mods on what's it called, the nexusmod.com or
yeah,
whatever.
Nexus
Yeah,
mods.
yeah, dude, it's
Um,
wonderful.
yeah, so
Oh yeah, I was
there.
gonna talk about the Super Mario thing. My nephew watches YouTube of people playing these modded Super Mario's, and he is so into it. He's like, "Oh, it's a new thing. Oh, how many hearts do I have left?" He's just like he gets so into those little videos because what they've done, they've taken the game engine of Super Mario and they tell like a little story within it. Like
Right, right.
like say for instance you hit one of those question mark blocks, all of a sudden the floor turns to lava, like just real wild stuff. He's like, "Oh no, why did that happen?" And he's just so like excited and engaged with that. I think it's cool. That's a game that I played when I was a kid, and now my nephew is super engaged in the same aesthetics, the same graphic visuals, not wanting to watch some hyper advanced, well, I don't even know what to say, cyberpunk 2047 kind of shit. There's still an
Yeah.
appeal to this pixel art. Um,
Well, we haven't changed, right? Like, that's the reality. We haven't
yeah.
changed. This stuff, if this stuff was appealing for a reason. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
Shigeru Miyamoto uh is not a dumb man.
No.
He was a guy who had to, like, obviously he wasn't the one who, because old NES games, I think it was different by the SNES, but old NES games, like before the Super Nintendo, the first Nintendo, like, they didn't have any tools for like drawing sprite pixel art. So what they had to do is there's was like a guy, and his whole job was to, they draw the sprites on graph paper, and then there was a guy whose whole job was to hard code those sprites into the game using
Ugh.
assembly,
Yeah, that was before
right?
GUIs, graphic user interfaces.
Yeah.
That's right. He
So,
had to do that.
but see, like Miyamoto, I believe he had like a degree in like digital art or something, and this is in like the 80s, when, like, what does that even mean, right?
Yeah.
But like he drew, he drew cartoons and stuff, right? So he was the first guy to make like a game character that he drew Mario on a piece of paper, and then he had to be like, well, how do I get the recognizable aspects of this character into like, you know, like a 16 by 16 resolution image, right?
Right.
How can I? That actually informed a lot of his design. That's why he's colored the way he was because of hardware limitations. That's why he has overalls because it was just a detail he could add, right?
Yeah.
So,
Well,
but
see, you remember how we were talking about playing a game with all the cheat codes compared to
yeah,
not? I think there's a bridge here with that, in that the limitation of what you can express in that game gave it its own unique aesthetic that we still love today. This okay, think about putting your thumb over a water hose to create pressure when you got to blast
right.
something off. I, it's similar to that when you put these limitations, when you create these challenges. It creates an aesthetic, it creates a vibe, it creates a feeling, it creates something that people latch onto, that they relate to.
Well, it's like we were saying earlier with Hinduism. It's like, well, you if you had if you had the cheat codes to reality, you get very bored very fast, you
Yeah.
know?
And
Like, but
with
imagine,
Cyberpunk and other really high graphic games, sometimes they are a little boring, or sometimes they're so janky when they're released, like Cyberpunk, nobody can play it. Because
well, that gets into
they didn't put enough limitations. What was the primary goal of Super Mario? It was to be fun. What is the
right,
primary goal of Cyberpunk? Not to be fun, to be realistic. Is that
right.
better?
Yeah.
I would
Well,
say
I think there's this idea of like that like a lot of people who are like they don't know a lot about actual game development, but they like the idea that they could be a game developer one day. You see Kickstarter scams as well as not necessarily scams, but someone who doesn't know what they're doing trying to fund an idea that they don't know how to make, right? They call it the everything game, right? So it'll always be like an idea where it's like, well, what if there was a game and it's like you could be like a shopkeeper, or you could be like a mercenary, or you could be just like a regular guy, and like what if you had to eat food because you have to eat food in real life. So what if you had to eat food and drink, and like what if you could go anywhere, so like any building you could enter, right? And it's like this,
yeah,
they just think of a game that's like perfectly realistic in terms of its function, without realizing, like, first off, that would be so complicated, that would be infeasible to develop,
right.
both for hardware limitation reasons and also the actual development process of how many artists you need to be involved, how many programmers you would need, how much design work the designers would have to do, how many systems, right? And it's just like it's like an idea that is like removed from the reality
Yes.
of game development. But I think another factor, and I have a story to tell with this one. I think another factor is games these days are really just designed to nickel and dime you, right? And
Yeah.
it started
Pay
in
to
like the
play
later X.
or pay to win. I
Yeah, it
mean,
started. Yeah, it started in the Xbox 360 era, right, where EA was a particular offender. Ubisoft is pretty bad, and these big companies, they just like they're trying to squeeze every last penny out of you, right? So like in Dead Space 3 on the Xbox 360, if I recall correctly, you could just buy extra ammo with real money, paying $5 for a clip of ammo in a video game, like, and that's like a microcosm of what AAA gaming
it's
has
worse
become,
than
and that's
gambling. Like at least when you pull the slot machine, you might get some money.
right, right. Well, I mean that's where you get into the whole loot box thing, where it's like you pay real money to spin a digital slot machine to get like a skin for a gun,
Hmm.
right? Where it's like, oh, my gun is green camo now. Ooh, my gun looks like it's made out of candy,
Well,
right? Um,
to your point of what you were saying earlier, games are not what they're supposed to be. They don't serve the function as a game any longer. What they serve is escapism. You know, like what you were saying, I want to go into every building. I want to interact with every single person. Like, dude, why don't you walk outside? No, I want to do it in a
Yeah.
game. I want to play. I want to sit in my house and I want to have a whole other world that is just like this one, but I can go on a car chase and I can blow things up and I can shoot anybody. I can be evil. You know, I can do whatever I want with no consequences.
Well,
Why
I
is
think the
that
thing
such
is,
a deep fantasy in people? Again, I think it circles back to we don't have rituals. We don't have coming of age rituals. We don't know when we're adults. Is it when you're 18? Is it when you're 25? Are you a man when you're 25? How about 30? Nobody can answer that question. But if you say, I'm a man that owns a Fortune 500 company and I'm 25, are you still a man? Or what? What are you? Like, do you conduct yourself like a man? Do you have a moral code? Or do you just have a lot of money? Is that the same thing? We
um,
don't know the answers
well,
to these questions in society right now. We have no idea.
I think the thing is, it's like on one hand, it's people looking for escapism, but on the other hand, it's big companies seeing that people are looking for escapism and thinking, "Oh shit, I can make a free money machine. I can make a legal money printer just by making something that's good enough that masses of people will buy into it, right?
Yeah.
And I can have perpetual like systems or like perpetual payments where it's like, oh well, there you got to get the battle pass because if you buy the battle pass every season, then you can get some skins from that if you play enough. And oh well, we have the special Rick and Morty skin only available for a limited time, right? Don't you want to be Rick in Fortnite? Wouldn't that be awesome? Ooh, don't forget about the limited time Peter Griffin skin, right? Like it's all this like nickel and diming. And I think if you really want to see people passionately making games, really the place to look is the indie scene,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, I
Where
loved
it's like,
like for example, I love Stardew Valley. I love this other game
oh yeah.
called Death Trash. It has Stardew Valley graphics. You know, it's like a top-down
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Barotrauma, that is a wonderful indie game where you build a submarine with a crew in multiplayer, and you can talk to each other on your mic and like man missions fighting Lovecraftian monsters in the European oceans. That's cool. That's original. I do not need Cyberpunk. I do not need like Grand Theft Auto levels of reality infused into it to have fun.
Well, Stardew Valley is a really like heartwarming kind of example because that was one guy's passion project. One guy grew up with the Harvest Moon games and he was like, "What if I made my own
Yes.
kind of Harvest Moon game? And
Well,
what if I put in all the things I thought it should have when I was playing them?" And he did it, right? And sure, you're not going to get like with indie games, you're never going to get like the most cutting edge graphics, but
let's go
like
down this wormhole with Stardew Valley. What is so heartwarming about it?
that it's art for art's sake, you know?
What
And
what is the narrative of Stardew Valley? What's
oh, that's a very good point.
yes.
It's this struggle between between real community and corporate bullshit, you know?
Yeah.
So like
Joja
you have
Mart.
the so Doja Mart, yeah.
Who's
So
Joja
you have
Mart?
like
You know, we got that equivalent.
Walmart.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um well that's the thing, you get this choice in Stardew Valley of you can either fix the community center or you can demolish it and build a Joja Mart, right? And
Yeah.
it's clear which one the developer wants you to pick, you know?
Yeah, but he still gives
You
you
know?
that choice.
Right, right.
Like
Um,
what do you want? When you give everybody that plays the game a choice, they shut Joja Mart down every time. Because when you shut Joja Mart down, the community turns that old building into a movie theater
yeah.
where they go in there and have a good time, watch movies, you know, joke around and talk. And then you have to go in the process of rebuilding the community house where people do activities, art, they cook, they have a little playroom for kids. They have like little meetings trying to decide what they want to do with the community, how to push it forward. Each person has like a job, like Marnie. You know, she gives you farm supplies. That other dude runs a grocery store. Um, Another guy runs a bar. You know, that has music and a pool table, and everybody can go in there and eat something and have a drink and just carry on with each other. And then you have this weird dude living down by the beach, and he's a writer. He writes books for the community. So everybody has found their class. If we're talking like
Yeah.
RPG, like they found their class, they're leveled up, they've dedicated their lives to these things. That's what's missing. That's why it's such a popular game, and that's why it's so heartwarming. Uh, this is the deep fantasy of humanity, to have technology but still live in a village and have a place, have a job, have something you're good at that's unique to your community, to where you derive value. And there, you know, you don't see people diving down into video games all the time. You have like this one kid, Sebastian, always playing video games, but then you pull him out of his shell to where he comes outside more. Like that's the goal, not for him to be stuck inside, but for him to play the game of life with the people of Stardew Valley.
Right. And it's kind of funny because Stardew Valley, it didn't have it at launch, but it was always intended to be a multiplayer game. You can get
Mm-hmm.
4 people working the farm
Yeah,
together.
and you can
You
give them a
know?
little house where they can upgrade it and
Yeah.
have all their own
Yeah.
stuff in there. Yeah, dude,
Yeah.
that's the
Uh,
dream. That's the goal.
I remember the concerned ape. I think his name's Eric Baroni. Um, he when he started working on the game, he actually started a blog, uh, so he could like update people who were interested in how development was coming along. I followed that blog for years
Yeah.
before the game came out, right? And then it came out. It's like, oh my god, um, I'm really ADHD. I've never beaten the game, but like, oh my god, it's always nice when there's like a success story like that. Have I ever told you another sort of similar story? Is the game Undertale. Have you ever heard of Undertale? Have I ever told you about it?
I don't believe so.
So you know these like Japanese RPGs where it's like you play as like a hero with a giant sword and you got to fight monsters and there's some big bad guy who's like trying to destroy the world. That whole thing, battles between light and darkness.
Mm-hmm.
Um, this game is like a, a a subversion of that whole genre. So what it is there's humans and monsters and they coexist on a planet together. But then one day a war breaks out between them and the humans win and they seal monsters underground with a spell. Um, but there's like this mountain that has a hole in it. Like at the top of the mountain there's like a hole in a cave somewhere that leads to the monster world, and there's like this legend that people who climb, like children who climb the mountain, never return. And what happens is, you play as a kid who has climbed the mountain and fallen into the world of monsters, right? But what you find is that they're just like you, right?
They're
They're not
people.
actually monsters. They're people, right? And so what the whole draw of the game is it's like a turn-based RPG where you can attack the monsters, you can kill them and gain experience points, or you can you can try to act your way out of a situation. You have like, yeah, so you have like a fight command, but then you have an act command, right? And your act command will be like uh oh, there'll be like a jelly monster, right? Like a gelatin monster. And one of your commands will be like do a little jiggle dance, right? And then the monster's like, oh, you're like me.
You're like
Right? And then he
me.
becomes he becomes friendly, and then you have a spare button, and if you spare a monster, you win the fight, but you don't get any experience points, and you can move on, right? So basically the way the game works is, if there's two main endings, which are the extremes of either spectrum,
Uh huh.
right? And then there's the sort of spectrum in between of sort of neutral endings. I can't say the name of what people call the end. There's an ending where you have to kill all the monsters, and the people call it the word that starts with G, the G root,
What,
right? If
genocide?
you get what I'm, you shouldn't say that on YouTube, but yes.
Oh,
Uh,
man,
well, you're not monetized. No, you won't get you won't be it won't
Oh,
be
yeah.
you're not
No,
you won't
I doubt I'll ever get monetized. I'm just doing this for
yeah
fun. I'm not trying
right
to,
right
become an influencer or whatever. I
right.
just,
Well, they call it
when I'm older, I think it'll be cool to like look back at all these podcasts I've done with different people. It's just kind of like a photo album, I guess, to
yeah.
help me keep
Well,
track of what I'm doing. And whoever listens,
yeah
because we got a few people listening,
right.
you got anything to say or questions or comments, put it in the chat because I got it up and I can see it. But yeah, continue, man.
Um,
Sorry.
Yeah, so you have the genocide route, which is the route where you kill literally everything in the game. So you kill all the bosses, you kill all the random encounters. There's like a limited number of enemies in the game,
Hmm.
and the genocide route is where you kill them all, right?
Yeah.
And then there's a pacifist route and what's called a true pacifist route. So they're basically the same. You go through the entire game killing nothing. You get to the final boss, you're level 1, right? Um, there's even this like thing near the end. Spoilers for Undertale. This is your last chance if you care, just so you know. Um, there's a big twist at the end of the game where one of the characters from earlier and you've met sort of throughout the whole game. He says, "Now you will be judged. There, you've been collecting. Every time you kill someone, you collect EXP. What does EXP stand for? Execution points. When you
Oh,
gain enough execution points, your LVL goes up. What is LVL? Or what is LV?"
level.
And he says, level of violence. Sorry, it's
Oh,
level of violence, right?
okay.
And so the idea is like the more violence you cause, the colder your heart becomes, and the easier it is for you to commit violent acts without succumbing to uh, your own human soul, basically,
Well,
right?
yeah, yeah,
And
man.
so basically the difference between the true pacifist route and the pacifist route is they're the same. You kill nothing throughout the whole game. You go to the final boss level 1, and except in the pacifist route you have to go in the true pacifist route to get the best ending. You have to like go out of your way to you have to go out of your way to like befriend the more significant monsters, in particular like the boss monsters,
Right.
who are more defined characters than like the random encounter monsters.
That.
But like it's like this really beautiful game, and the music's great, and it was all made by one guy who did all the code, all the sprites. I think he had a friend do some of the art and character designs, but he did all the sprites, he did all the music, he did all the code, and it was just like a passion project for him, right? And it's like a really beautiful game. Um, but I just like that sort of a that sort of, like I said, it's like artistic purity. It's like sure he charged money for it, but he's got to eat, right?
Right.
It's like it was only like $15, right? And so it's just, someone had a thing they wanted to express to the world, and so they spent, a year of their life putting all their heart and soul into it. Um,
It reminds me that game reminds me very much of humans' interaction with wolves. Um, what did we do to the wolves? What do we do to these monsters that live out into the forest? We killed every single one of them. As many as we could anyway. Uh, and the result of that has been the slow and steady decline of the American ecosystem. Uh, I don't know about Europe and the rest of the world what their wolf situation is, but I know in America, you know, all of our animals that live out in the woods just become sicker. There are plants that totally disappear. Water systems and water tables change because the plants that are not there, that were eaten by the abundance of deer, rabbits, all these herbivores, uh, create an imbalance in nature. And so humans have had to take up this mantle through, in America, the Department of Natural Resources, this responsibility, this godlike responsibility to balance it out, to fight invasive species, to try and figure out why all the hemlock trees are dying, to figure out what's going on with the deer, why are they so sick, to figure out how many that we can kill and at what time of year you can kill them. So you got all this calculus flying around, these helicopters flying around with thermal scopes on, sniper rifles, trying to help cull this overpopulation of deer or whatever the issue is, or hogs. In Texas has a horrible hog problem. A lot of America has a terrible hog problem. Whereas before, when we allowed the wolves to live, they took care of it all. And what happened is, the DNR in Yellowstone National Park was just like, look, this is costing so much taxpayer money to try and balance this park, to go out in these helicopters, to go out here with all these hunters, to go out into these vehicles and figure out and scan, study, understand, get a reading on the forest to try and see what we got to do next. What do we got to juggle now, guys? Like, Jesus. So they said, we got to bring the wolves back. We got to put them back in here. Well, what if the wolves eat people? What if they, what if all of this, what if it's horrible? Okay, yeah, it might be, but here's the thing. The forest is dying. The animals are all fucked up. There's too many herbivores running around. All of the plants are getting eaten. It's chaos. So let's just try it. Let's track the wolves. Let's see where they're at. Let's try and make it as safe as possible with modern technology. And I think they did this like 10 years ago or so. They released these wolves out into Yellowstone National Park. They started, killing the weakest animals, and the strongest ones survived and moved on and bred and strengthened the bloodlines of these herbivores. And the plants came back. And when the plants came back, that changed the flow of water, and then all of a sudden these rivers and streams and creeks sprouted up out of nowhere. All because they put wolves back in. That's the one variable they changed. They put wolves back in to the park, and it revitalized it like magic.
Well, presumably there were too many herbivores, right?
Right.
And so they were eating all the plants, and so the plants were dying. And then because of that, the herbivores were actually dying because they didn't have enough to eat because it was already eaten.
Yes.
So you introduce a thing that eats it, and you rebalance things.
And also the slowest and weakest ones survived. So it muddied their gene pool for over 100 years. And it didn't. What's alarming is it didn't take that long. You think about evolution sometimes on like that hundreds of thousands and millions of years. This was like 100. It's just fascinating to me how crucial each and every species is in the circle of life. And when you take out one link in that chain, the whole thing comes apart. It's a huge controversial topic, these wolves, because they have done so well that they're moving down into Colorado and other states. And, they're getting into farmers' livestock and killing them. And the farmers are shooting the wolves, and then that's illegal. So their farmers are going to jail, or they're getting in trouble, and all this stuff. So, the thing that I just wonder about is, why don't we have better fences? Why don't you have like some sonic stereo system on these posts that emit a sound that dogs and wolves don't like, or maybe it could emit a chemical pheromone to repulse wolves in particular, or all animals. Maybe you don't want animals in there. Maybe you do. Can't we figure that out? Or, at the very least, we do have the technology of motion sensors and paintball guns. So could you create sentry turrets across your fence to shoot paintballs at wolves? That'll scare them. Or at least can we try? Like, we try so hard to control and dominate nature, that it ends up destroying it. So I just wonder, you know, we've been to the moon, man. Like, we have this crazy technology. Can't we just figure out this? Like, or why is nobody interested? Or is it too hard for us? Is it just too hard? I don't believe that, you know? I don't believe that. Uh, so I don't know. I'd like to start like this huge initiative of like, let's build a fence, like a wall of Eden, you know, because the Garden of Eden had these like supposedly perfect walls, right, where nothing could get through it, and it separated the chaos from outside and the beautiful order in the garden. So like, why don't we make like a concerted effort to, you know, make some better walls? I don't know. Maybe walls are a controversial topic right now, uh, but I do think we could find a way to make a wolf fence or something to where, I mean, if it's that simple to just put wolves back in the woods and it fixes so many things and saves all this tax money, what I mean, what's there not to like about it?
Well, yeah, I mean, we gotta learn to live in balance with nature. We've been out of balance for a very long time. Uh, hmm. I think I maybe got two more topics in me, and then maybe
Yeah, bro.
we could cut it there. So, back to the video games thing. There was a story I wanted to tell, or like some. Uh, there's something I wanted to tell you about, right? That I find like the perfect example of like what the AAA games industry is, right? So this is definitely past your time,
Mm-hmm.
but there is a game that I grew up with called Roblox, and it's like one of the biggest games in the world right now. And it's like a kids game. It's sort of like Lego, right?
Yeah.
So what it is it's not a game on its own. It's like it's more of a game engine, except unlike a normal game engine where you can export it and give the files to your friends or put it on a CD or put it on Steam and sell it. Like you can't export your stuff. You can only publish it to the Roblox website, right? So what it is it was basically a platform where kids would make games for other kids, right? And as it progressed, right, they also added the ability for kids to make cosmetics for each other's characters, right? And so what it was it was like a really cool way to get into programming as a kid because you had to use Lua script in order to code these games.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was like imagine playing with Lego, that sort of aesthetic, but you're like coding the bricks to do certain things. And so kids would make the people would make like paintball maps and there was one called Base Wars where it was like a perpetual capture the flag thing where
Yeah.
you had all these vehicles and different weapons you could get and you had to go to the other base, grab the flag and then bring
Mm-hmm.
it back, but while you had the flag you couldn't attack, that sort of thing.
Okay.
So, and the map was huge, right? And so people it was like all these kids like innocently making games for each other, right? And what happened was it became big and it became this big corporate thing and suddenly it wasn't suddenly they put in the feature where you were able to monetize your game so you could
Uh,
put microtransactions in your games.
so it
And
died.
so it didn't that's the sad part, it didn't die, it just became like a monstrous form of its former self, because as opposed to the beginning where it was kids making these sort of but simple games that were still really creative and people had fun with. Now it was like, well, there's actual teams of people who now are like full adults who are professional and they're just coming in to fucking milk children of their lunch money,
Right.
right? And so whereas before all the games on like there's like a browsing games feature where there's like a front page of the most played things at that moment. Like whereas that used to be filled with stuff made by other kids, now it sort of over time it became filled with like stuff made by companies to try and make as much money as possible. So it would be like
Diabolical.
it's like even more rancid than even a lot of the other AAA stuff, right? It's like it'll be like a clicker game, right, where it's like you know like an idle type game where it's like, oh, every second you get one jump power and you can jump higher, and if you yeah no
Fucking
this is
lame.
what it is.
Yeah.
So no like so there'll be like a staircase and every step is like higher than the other, right? And if you wait long enough, you'll eventually be able to jump to the top
Dude.
where there's like a thing you can press, and then you go back to the beginning at 0 jump power,
Can
but
you
now you have a
imagine?
one.
Can you imagine in the '90s playing Super Mario and you have to pay for a mushroom?
Well,
Like,
right,
dude, what the fuck?
because what happens is when you get enough jump power, you can jump to the top, right? And then you can like hit a button and that gives you 1 point, and as you get enough points you like unlock things, right? But if you don't want to wait, you can just buy 10 points and then you can go to the super cool playground part of the map, right? And it's like, man, this game was like so pure. It was like so innocent when I was a kid. There's another thing, right? They used to have two currencies in the game. There were tickets, also called ticks, and Robux. Robux were the premium currency that you had to pay real money for, whereas ticks was a thing that you just got for free, right? So every day you would log on, you'd get like 10 ticks, right? So you could if you logged on regularly enough, you could save them up. And what you could use those for is they had official cosmetics, right? And then they had cosmetics made by like people. So like a kid would be like, "Oh, well, I want to play as Link, so I'm going to make a Link skin, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm also going to sell it, and another kid will be able to use the same skin. He just has to give me 15 ticks or like 10 Robux or something, right? And so it was like, in the beginning, you had this daily allowance of like customization options you had for your character. What happened was they took out ticks, and now Robux was the only free currency. So if you're like a poor kid, or you can't convince your parents to make a credit card purchase, or you just don't have the money to go buy one of their gift cards, like suddenly you are the default character for the rest of the game. No more expressing yourself through character creation anymore, right? So it's just they took this really innocent, fun game that was such a blessing to grow up with, and they turned it into like just a real cesspit of corporate greed. Um,
Man, that's
but
it's
yeah, so
unbelievable how the newer generations, like, it was just normal for them. Like, when I went to this pawn shop when I was a kid, and that's where I got my Nintendo games. These cartridges, these little gray cartridges. Um, you could get them. They're super cheap because people would go there and pawn them. And I got all these different kinds of games. And once I bought a game with my allowance, that was mine. I owned it. The whole complete thing. Like, there's not all this other extra shit. There's not like an extended cut, a DLC, none of that. That was the whole game. They worked on it diligently for a long time, made it what it needs to be, and they sold it to me. I bought it. I cannot imagine as a kid going through a game, having to buy a mushroom to make myself really big to get through the game in Super Mario. Like, that's... Or to get Yoshi. Like, oh, you want to unlock Yoshi? Oh, you can move around and, stick your tongue out like a frog and fight things and do all this cool shit. You want to buy Yoshi? I would be like, fuck. I mean, I was a kid. I would be like, that's crazy. I'm not doing that.
well,
I'm going to go outside
well,
and play instead. That's what I'd say as a kid.
oh right, like well, see, I was sort of in between because there were like online games that had stuff like that, right? That kids my age had played, right? Um, Not all of them were as bad as the others. Like RuneScape kind of made sense. They gave you a lot to do if you were a free player. But for $10 a month, you could get access to the full game, right? So I don't think subscriptions and it's like subscription type stuff makes sense for online games. But you have these kids playing these like offline mobile games, like the sort
Yeah,
of idea the
online
iPad
games,
gave
you're,
you.
you're right about online games because they have to be maintained. There needs to be a staff. And, like, I play Star Trek Online a lot. And what I
Yeah.
appreciate about that is every year they come out with 4 or 5 expansions, new missions, new little weird things that they add into it. And they give you all these perks. They encourage you to play it. And it's free. That part. You can do this other shit when you get real deep into PvP. You can buy super exclusive ships, but you got to use real money. And you got to do all this stuff. And there's people I know that have dumped thousands of dollars into starships and phasers and special armor and all that stuff. But you know what's interesting about it? They have a market where you can sell that stuff and you can get more money. It's kind of wild, man. And that's interesting when you give people the ability to increase the value of the things that they bought.
Right.
Yeah.
So let me give you an example of what the shit I don't like is. So my nephew, he really likes Sonic, which I can understand because I really liked Sonic at his age, right?
Yeah.
Uh, and he plays this. My brother, his dad has a family iPad that they all take. They all take like a half-hour turns on, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he has this one Sonic game that he really likes to play, where it's like an endless runner type game, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there was just this one time my mom gave all, because he has two sisters, my mom gave them all $5, and like immediately when my brother came to pick them up, because my mom was like babysitting them, when my brother came to pick them up, uh, I he asked my brother to if he could spend his money on a power up in the game, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh man, they don't know what they're missing.
No.
You could have gone and got a chocolate bar. You could have put that in a piggy bank and saved up for a real cool toy, right? And then you're spending it on like an extra life or like a super power up that makes the game easier. When when we played games as kids, it just would be in the game.
That I mean, I guess that's their
like,
toy, because I don't know how many kids play with toys anymore. Like, I don't know. I mean, my nephew, he plays with toys. I see other kids around here playing with toys, but very quickly do they start getting on that iPad. Thankfully, my sister has been like, hey, you can't get on that iPad, you can't do this technology, because he's gravitated towards it because other kids are that he's seen at school. And so I think it depends from here and there, but for the majority, because I worked in IT, I still do IT stuff, I still fix things for people and whatnot, but I see a lot of this iPad baby syndrome stuff going on, man. I see this I don't know, like, okay, for example, I fixed this iPad for a kid, and he didn't even look at me when I gave it to him, and he didn't even talk. And his mom said he's very grateful. He's so glad you gave that back to him. Thank you. And I looked at the kid, and he didn't move or do anything or express anything. And I'm like, and I saw that a lot.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was strange.
Well, I remember being a kid, and there were times where you just got bored with video games and you wanted to go outside and play, right?
They don't.
And I wasn't like a sports kid. I didn't go outside to play basketball or anything, but I'd go outside and like play imaginary games, right? Where it's like that was the loop. Was you go inside to play Zelda, and then you go outside to pretend you're Link. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And it was like or there was a game.
I'd go outside and pretend I'm the Doomslayer with my dad's chainsaw. Like, I feel you, dude. Like, you want to embody these things sometimes. You want to, go fight evil and cut up demons and be the good guy. But these kids nowadays, man, I don't see them doing that. They lack so much social skill that they lack social skill with themselves. I mean, I played by myself, for hours out in the woods and making up narratives and stories in my head. And other friends that I have did the same thing. It's not like some crazy unique thing that I did. Like, that was a commonality. We would all go out and play. And when we could, and when I could, and there were other kids, we'd be like, hey, you want to play Star Trek? And be like, we're on an alien planet. And I would have these phasers and tricorders, and we'd like go out in the woods and like play an episode of Star Trek or something, like something that we all watched and were kind of familiar with. And even if they weren't familiar with Star Trek, never saw it, they were open to me explaining it. And then the next day, we'd play Power Rangers because they loved Power Rangers. And so, instead of phasers, we'd have, swords and or he would have a
Yeah.
box, and that would be like his Megazord, like his mecha, that he's fighting stuff. And I'm
Right.
like, cool, let's do it. Uh, and
I
I
remember
don't see kids doing that, and that's a shame. That was so much fun.
I remember one time I had this friend, and in his back, I live in the suburbs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this friend in his backyard, like you know how suburbs, like if you were to remove all the fences between all the houses, there's just this one large field, right? Uh,
Yeah.
and so the in this particular case, the in between this block he was on wasn't uh like fully developed, right? It was like a little tiny woods between all the houses, right? So I'd go to his house and we'd go out there sometimes, and we would play like Lord of the Rings, right? Where
Nice.
he'd be like, Governor, we've got to get the ring to the Mount Doom. And
Exactly,
it, you
dude.
know,
And you'd have to
it's like I
imagine a volcano, and it'd probably be like a stump with a hole in it. And you got to throw it in. Uh, but dude, that's so
you know,
important. The embodiment of that. It's like we did these little rituals. These games were rituals of embodying these stories that mean so much to us. To try and be these heroes, and face the world and its difficulties and solve them. But now I'm gonna do it on an iPad, or I'm gonna do it on my computer or whatever.
right. It's like we're losing connection to the most like the most core thing there is, you know?
Yeah.
The thing that connect if there's anything that connects us to God, it's the imagination, you
Mm-hmm.
know? It's I almost don't even want to call it spiritual because I almost see it as like more core to existence than spirituality, you
Right.
know? In the beginning, there was God in his imagination and he said, "Well, what if we played a game? What if we, you know?" And I almost wonder is like is that what the fall was? Was that some sort of on the playground of the omniverse, some sort of fight, some sort of argument started among the kids, and they all like went into factions of like, to like simplify it, it's like, well, we all want to play Star Wars, and we all want to play Dune, and we all want to play My Little Pony, right? So all these
Right.
factions like
Jesus.
split off,
Yeah,
right?
like
And
like
so
in
it's
Frank
like,
Herbert's Dune, the scattering.
right,
I think that is
yeah,
what happened. And you listen to that last podcast I did there with Shogun.
yeah, I
My
was there
friend
for
my,
that.
my friend wrote this book trying to address that. Like there is a conflict. Mainly between men and women. We
Yeah.
just don't know how to communicate. And long story short, where is God's wife? What kind of model of a family are we supposed to embody? Because think about what we were just talking about, playing Lord of the Rings, Star Trek, Power Rangers. Why? We had to embody it to learn the lesson and figure out how to be good ourselves. So, in mainstream religion, what story are we being told, and how do we embody being a transcendental being at the end of time? That's not relatable. Is that a good aim? Like, I don't know. But I look at the old religions, like the Norse mythology, the pagan religion of Odin and Freya loved each other, a man, a woman, a god, and a goddess, and they had a child, Thor, and they loved him, and they treated him well and tried to teach him valuable lessons. And so, what did everybody do? They're like, I'm going to embody Odin as a man. The woman would be like, I will embody Freya as a woman. That is the highest aim. And then the son is like, I'll try to be Thor. And then the daughter had, another goddess or example, or Freya herself. So I think that has deeply confused people. We don't know what story to play. When we're out in the woods, what story should we? How do you play house? I remember in elementary school, we, the girls would want to play house in the jungle gym, like this,
Wait, hang on. I just want to point out, like, there's something almost like there's something sort of like pointing at our history in that dynamic where like the 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 girls want to play house, and the
Hmm.
boys all want to play soldiers.
Yes.
Right.
Why do we want to
And
play
no,
soldier though? We want to defend the house because it's the most important
right.
thing.
Right, so like real well, I think there's this other thing that like you know how young boys are. It's like
Hmm.
if you talk to girls when you're young, it's like, oh, you're gay.
Hmm.
It's gay talking to girls.
Or you
You
got
shouldn't talk to
cooties.
girls.
Yeah, you got
You got
cooties.
cooties.
And that's an effective thing because boys and girls shouldn't be in close proximity to each other anyway until they get older. So I think that's perfectly normal. I
I don't
think
know
that's
about
fine.
I don't know. I think it's normal that kids make fun of each other because there's like a I don't know. It's like how do I put it? It's like there's like it's like there's a pre-developed understanding of the relationship between men and women, and the
Hmm.
kids are just not ready for that. But at the same time, I think little boys and little girls can be friends,
Well, no, they
right?
are
Like
friends, but they don't want to like touch. Like I was
right,
friends
right.
with
Well, yeah,
girls in
of
school when
course.
I was a boy, and we would play house together, and soldier, and they would be like, "Stop throwing pine cones! They're not grenades." So we already initiated the approach to each other, and figuring out how to be in the same jungle gym together. How
Right,
do boys and girls play on the playground is an
right.
extremely important thing.
How do you reconcile playing soldier with playing house? How do you make it
Yes.
one game?
How do you make it
You know?
one? And you do make it one game. You do. Like that's what
And then
happened.
and then yeah, and then usually by the end of elementary school, that's when crushes and stuff
Yeah, you
and
start hitting
you know
high school and stuff. The hormones start flying around, and then you're really thinking about playing house and playing soldier and figuring out who you are really. Some people join the army. Women become mothers and have to maintain a house. Uh,
well, maybe that's what we're trying to figure out is how do we get all the kids on the back to the whole idea of the
Playfulness.
playground of the omniverse. How do we get everyone to come back and play together
Well,
again?
that was
Because at the end of the day,
Jean Piaget's central point in his child psychology is the very most important activity a human being can do in their development is learning how to play with others.
right.
And we don't do that anymore. We play on the internet, and that's great, but we don't play with anybody around us. Kids don't play in school. It's discouraged because they might get hurt. So there's this helicopter parenting aspect to everything that's kind of snuffing out the spirit of humanity. And you can see it as, I think that's what's the cause of all this rise in autism, quote unquote autism. I think it's kids that are not stimulated properly and they kind of go retarded, in a
Well,
very literal sense retarded, not like I'm making fun of them. Like they're turned down. Their consciousness, like if you have your hand on a knob, is turned down so far that
that's
there's something wrong.
hang on. I gotta go to the bathroom, but I have some points to make on that.
Yeah, bro, go
So I'll be
ahead.
right back.
I need to get some intermission music. That would be good. I could beatbox. That's too cringy though. I'll just keep rambling on and on. Did anybody ever eat those little orange Tic Tacs, like candy? Like, whenever I got those little Tic Tacs in that clear box, I would try to just like eat one or two. Like, I don't need that many mints. But those little orange motherfuckers were so good, I would end up eating that whole box, man, and eating them like candy. Ah, those things are good. I haven't had any of those in years. Man, it's such a good orange flavor. And then they're like melting in your mouth, and you just kind of chew on them, and then they turn into this, I don't know, this like a pillow. You just mush it down, satisfying. I seen in the store they had like a giant box of these orange Tic Tacs, and I almost bought them, but I didn't. I got the cherry ones instead. They make cherry ones. Those are good. Man, blows that orange out of the water. I wish we would have had cherry ones when I was a kid. I'd eat those all day long. So I got that got that big box of those cherry ones and ate them up. They got that sweet little tart pillow texture. I should have got two. Oh well. Next time. You always got to get a reserve. Because we got snowed in over here. And I couldn't get out of my driveway. Couldn't get on the road. It was all fucked up. Ran out of candy. What do you do? I started eating rice. And that's, just it's just not candy. It's good though. Rice is good for you. But it's not chocolate. I always had that backup.
Hello?
Hey, what's up, man?
Okay, so I on the topic we were last talking about when I left.
Mm-hmm.
So uh, I'm not autistic, but I do have ADHD, right? And the thing about that is, they're both neurodivergencies, right? And so the idea of what a neurodivergency is it's like the brain operates in a different way, and it's not like a learned thing. It's like, you have your child and you just notice that even as a baby they're a little bit different, or right. So again, I'm not autistic, but like it's clear to me that they're when I look at how other people act and are able, for example, I have a real tough time like being productive or getting chores done, right? Because I get distracted so easily, right? And the thing is, it's not necessarily a disability. I mean, it is in the context of like the modern society we live in and how things are constructed and how things work in this world. But but one theory for what ADHD is that it's a holdover from hunter gatherer uh, cultures, right? So the idea is that, like, well, back then you had like the ADHD guy, and he's like doing a bunch of different things at once. He's like gathering berries, and then he gets bored gathering berries, and he thinks, oh, I should go hunt. I should go find a deer and
Yeah,
hunt
he's
and
a
bring
he's
back
a
the meat.
scanner.
But he's also like, right,
He's always
and
scanning
so
new possibilities, new things, new tasks. Jack of all trades.
I, another word I heard this from, there's a YouTuber called the Healthy Gamer or something. He's like a psychiatrist
Yeah, I've
and
watched
or
him.
a psychologist or something. Yeah, and he made the point that like what you have with ADHD, and I think he said he had it, but he said what you have with ADHD is easily distracted. But another word for easily distracted is more perceptive,
Yeah.
right? They're
You notice things.
they're things, and you notice things, right? And I think a similar thing is going on with autism, right? Think about this. Alan Turing was autistic, and he basically invented our understanding of computers, right?
Yeah.
And if you go into like an advanced university math class, guaranteed there's going to be quite a number of people in there who are um, autistic, right? And so it's not
Well, maybe I should
necessarily
use a different
it's
word
not like
because what would you call a a a 10-year-old without the capability to look up and meet you in the eye and say thank you or to communicate or that he would have such crushing anxiety and fear of communicating with another human being that they look down at their tablet. What if maybe it's not autism, maybe it's a shutting down.
I don't think we have a I don't think we have a word for it because we've never faced this
Yeah,
problem as a
so maybe I'm
species, you
not
know?
saying the right word. It's not odd because Alan Turing could communicate with people. He had a job. He could look at people. Um, he just looked at the world differently. These
Right.
kids today, I don't know what this is. It's a shutting down. It's a there's nobody home. They didn't develop, you know, psychically, socially, psychologically. They're I don't know, like hollowed out. It's kind of scary, like zombies. Maybe that's why the zombie archetype has been so popular. That's what we've become, like a land of zombies.
I mean, I sort of yeah, I think that's what I find interesting is how like this sort of interplay you have between uh sort of the imagination and the real world, where it's like um there's like a mirroring of our fiction, right?
Mm.
And but it's not like a literal mirroring. We don't have
It's
literal
it's the
zombies,
collective
but we
unconscious. Yeah.
right. Um, I mean, I think it comes down to really that um, the world is not a friendly place, and I think people want to be friendly, and they want to be friends, and they want they want to enjoy existing, and just the world as it is controlled by a very small handful of people who want to live better than anyone else when,
Well, that's
even if it's
because
not
they
better than
allow it.
anyone else they'll
It's
right.
it you know the masses allow. Like we said earlier, why do a majority of people buy a device that has the blood of children inside its circuitry? You know, this
Right.
child slavery. Why? Well, they don't think about it, man. Why? Because it's not ridiculed. Because it's not punishable.
Well, you know
Because
what's
it's not a
crazy?
problem.
There's even a child labor problem that's starting to sprout up in the States because like companies are finding these like loopholes basically, and so you have like fucking 12-year-olds like flipping burgers. I
I
think there
didn't
was a
know
whole
about
thing where
that.
like,
That's wild.
oh, look into it, look into it. Um, it's becoming a bigger problem of like kids working in like, and we're
Well,
not
I mean,
talking
as
about like a paper.
teenagers, yeah, teenagers, I think it's healthy for them to like have a
Yeah,
skill
yeah,
and a
sure.
trade and have something to do. And that could be a thing we figure out. What age should kids be adults? Or what's this in between teenager land where you're in school for all this time where you could be like skilled in a job or have some actual merit and a house, and by the time you're entering into your 20s, you're actually financially resource ready, psychologically ready to be a father. um,
Right. I would agree. What I'm saying is I would even agree that a paper route is a fine thing for like a 10-year-old to have,
yeah,
right? Like that sort of
yeah, there's
thing.
like a
But we're
certain
talking
line of labor that's acceptable, if
right.
it's yeah.
But we're talking about like 12-year-olds working at White Castle, right? That was a big thing where someone went to White Castle, and I think it was some fast food place, and I want to say it was White Castle,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just there's like this 12-year-old behind this clearly, I mean, he's not a toddler, he's not like an 8-year-old, but he's like clearly a young kid
Right.
working at this fast food place, and like hot oil, anything with any like thing with knives or oil or just food in general. I mean, fine to teach your kid that at that age, but letting them work in that environment where there's this danger, like not okay, Or I would also say manual labor, like warehouse work, that sort of thing. That would also anything where they're lifting a lot of weight all day, like that's just not healthy for a child's body,
Right.
and it's becoming this issue. I think once you get to a teenager, like then it's of course there's like you should
Yeah,
be
you
able
go through your
to
growth spurt. You got more muscle mass. It's
yeah.
more difficult to hurt you.
Well, a 16-year-old is almost fully physically, like as far as the physical body goes, not the mind takes longer to develop, but as far as the physical body goes, 16-year-olds are like 2 years away from being physically an adult,
Right.
right? And so it's just a shame that this is becoming a problem, right? Because
Well, yeah, I think it
it's
is just like an arrested development. I think a lot of men that I've spoken to in private feel like even in their 30s they're not quite a man yet because they don't have a house. Maybe they haven't finished school. Maybe they have a lot of other things. Maybe they've never had a girlfriend because they were too busy. Or maybe a lot of things, a lot of maybes, a lot of these extra things that distract us from growing up, maturing, and becoming, who we're supposed to be, who we want to be, more accurately.
um so let's move on to the last thing I have,
Mm-hmm.
and then I do have a closing statement
Okay.
that I think you like. Last thing I had, I'd like to break into this old well that we like to you and me have gone into multiple times, because I'd like to go into this well because while I was in the shower,
Mm-hmm.
so when I washed my face, right, like I'll put the loofah on my face, scrub it up, and then I'll like put my face under the shower head, right? And when I
Yeah.
do this, I have this habit of like squeezing my eyes closed really tight, And what happened was, like, you ever squeeze your eyes tight around like light and you
Yeah, you
see like
start
an
seeing
imprint?
shit. Yeah, dude, because you
Yeah.
change the blood flow and pressure in your ocular little sphere in there, that hollow part.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because when I did this, when I was rinsing my face, I saw a symbol that looked almost more or less exactly like uh the never-ending story emblem.
Oh, the
And I
Orin?
was like,
There's two
oh,
snakes
yeah, the
eating each
Orin.
other? That's
Yeah,
wild,
yeah,
dude. Dude,
yeah. So I
that's
was like,
wild.
I thought like, hey, I'll have to, that's definitely a topic to cover, is
I love that book.
because I think I've never read the book. I've only seen the
I
movie,
love the movie
but
too. Because
um,
they did a good job of sticking to the main parts uh, of the first half. The Neverending Story movie is only the first half of the book.
right. And I hear people say that the sequel is not as good of an adaptation. People don't
No,
like the
it's
Neverending
not
Story
as
2 as much.
magical. It wasn't done by the same Germans because the first Neverending Story was done in Germany, and they just had a different aesthetic lens perspective that they brought to it that just felt otherworldly. I mean, I felt like, like, what is this place? This is crazy.
But I don't know. I like when last time I was in the psych ward, like that was a whole. But a Neverending Story became this like symbol,
Yeah.
not like the main symbol, but it became one, and it just like something about the aesthetic, this like dark fantasy aesthetic, um, was like uh um something about the dark fantasy aesthetic seemed like it made me think of like it used to not be dark, and then something corrupted it, something brought darkness here,
Yes.
right? And something
The
about that
apathy.
idea.
That's what the wolf talks about at the end.
Right.
Um,
Um,
the apathy, the losing hope in your own dreams that you have, uh, not believing in yourself. Getting in this stuck in this 9 to 5 job like his dad. That after his wife died, he was just going to work, going to work, going to work, going to work, trying to forget, repressing it, and it created a shadow of nothing, which is what his son had to fight. He had to break the cycle, and thankfully in the book, he
wait, wait,
reunited
wait. So say that about the dad again. Who's dad?
Bastions, the main character in the Neverending Story.
Oh, so the book belonged to his dad first.
No, 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 no. The
Oh, okay.
book belonged to some guy at a bookstore that he ran into, running away from bullies. What I'm saying
Right, and
is,
he stole it.
so Bastion lost his mother, and his dad lost his wife, and the way his dad dealt with it was just work, 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 work. Um, and Bastion realized that his dad was not alive anymore. He didn't have an imagination, and Bastion got in trouble at school for drawing unicorns. And his dad's like, "You need to keep your feet on the ground, son. Like, you need to stop fantasizing and dreaming all day." And he's like, "Ugh, okay, Dad." He's like, "No, I'm serious. It doesn't matter if your mother died. You can't let that affect you and influence your life. You have to stay focused and get your work done." And so that's the rest of the story. His Bastion has to fight that because that's not the proper way to deal with that. That's not being alive. That's denying reality. That's escaping. His dad didn't play video games, but he went to work. That's what a workaholic is. I think workaholicism has been replaced with gaming. This obsession, this thing, this need for validation. Uh, People don't care about money anymore. They don't care about having. They don't have kids anymore. They're not getting married. They don't have houses to take care of. Uh, and so what's the outlet? Games, points, leveling up. But when they turn the game off, how sad are they? How depressed are people? How many people are killing themselves because they don't they don't have any meaning in their lives. So that's why I love the Neverending Story. It addresses that very thing. That is what the nothing is, consuming Fantasia. Fantasia is our imagination. It's the inner realms that you can visit. It's the stuff Terrence McKenna talked about. It's getting back in touch with it. And, that's what the counterculture, the hippies, Terrence McKenna, Alan Watts, all of them were fighting against or fighting for, is the revitalization of the human imagination to open up a better future.
I think I think that's exactly what it's about. I think almost that I wonder if there was a point in time where humans were deeply connected to the imagination, not to the point that they lived there as their permanent home, but that it was like a place they experientially, like imagine a dream where imagine every night you go to bed and you really feel just like you're awake, but you're
Yeah,
in this world, you're in Fantasia. I wonder if that's what the was what I wonder if that was part of our past,
I
was
do.
that
It was
we used
they
to
were
have that.
shamans. We called them shamans. And in Egypt,
Oh,
if you wanted to do that, you went to a mystery school and you became a magician or an alchemist or something. In England, yeah, that's always been here. But there's no place for it in society today. The only place we leave room for it is musicians. That's it. Like musicians
um,
have this I don't know leeway that painters, uh, philosophers, all these other people, just kind of don't have but that's because music induces embodiment through dance. Um,
right.
that's why that's way more important is to get people to move around, dance, shake around, talk to each other. Uh, think about humanity as a bunch of molecules. If the molecules are not moving around, nothing's happening. So you have to add some heat to get them to move, to do something, like get up and do something. And that's the function of music. I think that's why it's so popular. But there's all these other important tools that we're just ignoring. But there are pockets of them, rejuvenating this. And Terrence McKenna is accessible. Like, we weren't even conscious when he was alive, we were, you know, kids or something. So it's cool that we can reach back in time with YouTube and, you know, revitalize this stuff, make these old connections, and breathe new life into our culture. But
Well, you bring up the shaman,
yeah,
and it makes me want to ask, like, what is your view of stuff like schizophrenia, right? Like, what's going on there? Is that what they tell us it is? Is it just like a
no,
broken brain?
because you know that is uncontrollable. Shamans are in control. Um,
Right, but is it perhaps that because when you read about these shaman cultures, like when you hear about the initiation of a shaman in training, right? It does sound like what's going on is that this a kid has this experience of what we would call schizophrenia or a psychotic episode, and then there's the shaman there, and the shaman seeing this knows that this kid's the next shaman, and then that kid gets training. That kid is shown the ways and explained what's going on to them so they're able to control it and live with it. You get what I'm saying?
yeah. Um, I don't know about that part. What my theory is or hypothesis is that, you know, people had these sacraments. You know, they had these psychedelic plants and mushrooms that they would consume, and it's not something everybody else was really super interested in doing all day long. But some people got way into it and wanted to fuck with it all day long. And I think those people mapped out this territory and tried to figure out how to apply it to the tribe to move it forward, to try to see into the future or understand the situation or come to some conclusions about things. I don't know about the schizophrenia angle, and I'm only saying this from experience, because I've come across people that are crazy, you know, that are schizophrenic at like festivals and stuff. And sure, they can take the mushroom and they can take this acid and they say it has not affected them and they feel like this all the time. Maybe the training
Right.
would help them. Maybe it would, like, but I personally don't have any knowledge of that. I don't know. What I
Well,
have seen, what I have witnessed, is people that are not crazy that have done a lot of these mushrooms and things, and they have some wisdom that they can coherently express back to me in a conversation like we're having, and it's useful. Um, and the
would I be
other,
one of those people?
well, yeah, dude, yeah, we're having a coherent conversation, absolutely. Uh, these people, what I'm talking, these schizophrenic people that I'm talking about, dude, like they can't come out with a coherent sentence or a paragraph more accurately. Like they'll say a sentence or two that makes sense and then it will be disjointed some other thing. uh, they can't focus, and if you can't turn your focus on and off, like turn your visionary state on and then turn it off when there's like a battle or something dangerous is going on, i don't I don't know if that's a shaman. I think a shaman
Right.
is somebody that goes through these processes, these visionary states, and then they know when to stop and come back and talk to the people in the tribe and, you know, be, you know, normal, I guess.
What I will say is there was a study done on schizophrenics, and basically
Mm-hmm.
was what they found was that DMT was existed in measurable amounts in the urine of about half of them,
Yes.
right? Now, first off, the skeptic would probably say, "Oh, well, they just took it recently." But the problem with that is it has a really short half life, right? Like it
Right.
does not stay in your system that long. So they would have had to have taken it like outside the place where the study was being done, right?
Right.
So so I'm not a doctor, so my opinion isn't worth that much. But I see really two sort of main th- two sort of main possibilities that sort of have the same effect, right? Possibility one, they produce more DMT than the average person, right? That's possibility one. Possibility two, they don't break down DMT either in the same way or as well as the normal person. So either way, they have more in their system than a normal person was.
Right.
So, but just the fact that it's there in measurable amounts and it's not there in normal people, and when you put that with what you said, like they take these things and then they say, "Oh, I feel no different."
Right. They don't.
Suggests that possibly what's going on is they're on it all the time.
Yes.
They're producing it. They're tripping 24/7,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so that's why I question this line of that's why I go into this line of thinking of was there some sort of place for these people in the past?
Yeah. Why do we keep
That
making them? Why do they keep coming out? Right. Yeah.
right. I
Like
mean,
the ADHD thing you said. Why does that keep coming out? What's going on? And same
and
with
the only
the zombie kids, the zombie iPad kids. Are these just
right.
responses to the environment? Like, what can
Well,
you do? I don't know.
what would cause humans to evolve more DMT production,
Okay,
right?
what would cause humans to be immune to HIV? What would cause some humans to be immune to the bubonic plague? Variation. Uh, Variety is the spice of life, and there is a crucial function to all life being wildly different in certain ways. And I think this is just another example. It's another branch from the tree of humanity, and it bears this very interesting type of fruit that's different from the rest of the tree.
Right. Um, the only reason I bring up the shaman as a possibility is I can't see any other place where they'd fit into the equation,
Me
and
neither.
I I,
I
I
watched this
almost wonder
movie,
if
Altered States, from the 80s,
Mhm.
and it was about this psychologist or psychiatrist that gave schizophrenic patients high levels of DMT.
Mhm.
And they talked about how it's the same thing. That was the theme of the movie. So he went into a sensory deprivation tank and took like two handfuls of mushrooms, and he went back in time and like the Kwisatz Haderach, he relived all
Holy shit,
of the
dude!
past human male memories to the form of an ape. And what happened is his body literally transmutated into an ape. And he came out of the sensory deprivation tank and started eating and killing everybody. And anyway, I don't want to spoil the end of the movie, but that idea existed in there. Like the function of schizophrenic people was these shamans, these spirit guides that walked in between worlds. And maybe they did have this training that was passed down orally. That's why we don't know what the fuck to do about it. And it's gone
But we
now.
don't have a culture of it. We
No.
don't have a culture of shamanism. The closest thing we have would be the priest, and the priestly caste is full of charlatans.
Well, thankfully, we
Um,
can go to these other countries and islands and study what they're doing. We've been doing that for a long time. Uh, that's what they did in Mexico with these brujas or brujos. Sorry, brujos, uh, wizards, shamans in Mexico, and they found the psilocybin mushroom. And at first, these scientists that took it called psilocybin telepathine. Did you know that? Like it was,
yeah.
yeah, telepathine. And they called it that because they felt like they could read each other's minds, tripping hard on these mushrooms with the psilocybin in it.
Well, Terrence McKenna like thought he was schizophrenic, right? Like, you've heard the experiment at La Chorrera,
Oh
right?
yeah, yeah. The
And
mushrooms the size of dinner plates.
right, and what he attributes his sort of current his current sanity, if you want to call it that. I think he's pretty sane.
Oh
He's
yeah.
just
He's
he's a
just
sane man in
experimental.
an
He's an
insane
explorer. He's not
right.
crazy. No.
He's a sane man in an insane world, so he looks insane because he's
Right.
not.
Right.
But he attributes his sanity, the reason he still has it, to no one being able to interrupt the process and get in the way of this process that was exfoliating. Right, it was just him.
Yeah, he ran off into the fucking jungle for days. Yeah, he got the fuck out of there. Got away
It
from
was just
everybody.
it was just him and his brother and their research partners, and like, and so he had to go through this whole process. Like, what if that's what it is? It's a process. There's something that's going on, and he says it in one of his talks. He says, rarer than a like something like rarer than a unicorn in our society is an unmedicated madman, right?
Right.
And so, is it possible that there's like this exfoliation this is process that's supposed to happen, and it's just being interrupted every time it happens, and
Yeah.
that makes it so that every time it happens again, it just gets worse. When really there's just this thing the person needs to work
Yeah,
through,
it creates a
right?
shadow. Yeah, a source of resentment, of things you're not willing to face, things that you don't want
I,
to
I
deal
mean,
with, and it takes you over.
you brought up Dune, but like Paul is a really interesting example of this, right?
With the Harkonnen
Um,
blood in him, yeah.
Well, I mean that Paul is like you want to talk about sensitivities to drugs. Like Paul is a guy who's been biologically engineered to be sensitive to the spice, right?
Yeah.
Like he hasn't evolved to have a tolerance against it. He's evolved to have no tolerance against it, and it just hits him like a truck,
Yeah.
right? And so, um, I do wonder about this idea of transcendence, though, right? Uh, because you obviously, I mean, like,
Oh, I got a
because
lot
like
to
in a,
say on that. I got a lot to say
oh
on
yeah,
that.
oh yeah.
You go ahead.
Do you
So
want me to go first, or
yeah,
do you want me to go
you go
first?
first, bro. Yeah, I got a
Well,
lot to say about this.
well, a parallel idea is perhaps the schizophrenic people are like they're souls that are not meant to be in this plane, and they're here for some sort of healing process, but really they live on the dark side of the moon, to
Right.
use a metaphor, right?
Yeah. Yeah, they do. But I think it's important to have a spotter. Like what's going on over there, guys. Uh, I wouldn't say that they're not meant to be here. I would just say that through the genetic variation and the spice of life, that they are just another branch. I mean, they're supposed to be. It's another way that life is reaching out, spiraling out in all directions. Um, okay, so on the topic of transcendence, I think transcendence is a very dangerous idea. It's not one that we should, avoid or whatever, because that'll create another shadow of resentment and it'll come out even more powerfully. The idea of transcendence, the way that it stands now, is the abandonment of flesh, the rejection of the body into this AI server video game land, you know, uh, or the rejection of just basic human needs in favor of a transcendent idea. So, I've talked to you a little bit about this video game I played called Scorn, and it's
Yeah.
heavily influenced by H.R. Giger, Zizlau Brzezinski, uh, all these like kind of themes of transcendence. It's got Christianity in it, uh, paganism. It's got all these elements. Uh, but the main theme takes a big Christian theme in imagery, because there's all these crucified people in a temple that have their skulls split open, and neuronic flesh is coming out and going into the ceiling, creating a giant brain that is alive and dreaming. And all of the different crucified people's brains are just splattered up, connected. They're still alive into this brain, and all of their egos, individuals, are merged into this John Carpenter's The Thing, basically. So it was very interesting for me to see literally the idea of transcendence playing out. Uh, Transcendence is not something you want to do permanently. It's, if you want to have a mushroom trip and like transcend your perspective, that's cool. But we're really moving into an area of technology with the CRISPR virus where you can resequence your genome, you can change your DNA around, all this other stuff. we could talk about that would probably get me banned. Uh,
Oh,
but there's something really weird going on about how we are so disgusted with ourselves that we want to transcend out of it instead of look to the past, figure out what is meaningful, and bring it with us. It's kind of like, you watch these people grow up and they lose like their inner child. They lose touch with what they really love and care about. They lose touch with their heart. And they become these cold, hard, vicious people. And that in turn turns the world into a cold, hard, vicious place. And a place that people don't even want to live in. Uh, I don't think, that means everybody needs to be weak and apologetic all the time or anything like that. But understanding. And I think we've done a great job of that. We haven't had any world wars lately. We might hear soon. I hope not. But we've lived in a really great era of peace because I think those ideas were there and now they're starting to disappear again. These just common, what do you call it? Just these commonalities, this common knowledge that we once shared together. We used to have like a central pillar of morality that we all kind of gathered around. But now it's like the scattering. We're just all going away from each other as fast as possible in these different political, philosophical, uh, scientific, even ideas.
well, yeah, I mean the technological view of the concept of transcendence, the sort of singularity interpretation of transcendence. I mean, Terence McKenna talked about it, and he didn't talk about it like he considered it inherently a bad thing, but I also think he shared other versions of transcendence that were way more appealing, you
Yes.
know, because like we've gone all over the place, but we've sort of circled back, like to, to like Dune and Umami at this point, right? Where
Absolutely.
it's like we don't want to enter the interface. That's the
Exact.
last thing we want to do.
That's what it was in
And it's
Scorn. It's the interface, the simulation. It's not. It's the absence of embodiment. It's the absence of a body of being real. Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I think Terence McKenna had this other idea, um, and even this idea I think still sort of comes back to the Hindu thing of getting bored with infinite power, but he talks about it in an interesting way, right? Where he says like that this idea that like what if at death you become released into the imagination, right? Into the entire right? Like, and wouldn't that be way better than going into a computer owned by Bill Gates, or Elon Musk? Like,
Yeah, that sounds
uh,
awesome. Like you contribute. Like in Warhammer 40K, you go into the Immaterium, the warp. Maybe that's why the warp was so good in that lore in the beginning, and it turned shitty later on, turned into Korn and Slanesh and all these fucked up chaos gods. I feel like that's what we're
in
going through right now. Like these good examples that we used to look up to are now these chaotic, lustful, violent, vengeful, combative gods.
well, it's almost like so that story I told you about in the other podcast we did with Shogun, the one where we were talking about like pajamaism
Mm-hmm.
and all those things, right? Do you remember I told you about a web comic called Homestuck about kids who play a game that is not a game, it's actually like the reproductive system of the universe,
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah, that was wild. Yeah.
Yeah, so in that comic, at the start of the game, they get a thing called a kernel sprite, which is basically just this glowing like ball of like sacred geometry, right? And they at two different points at they get two different points to do this, but they get a chance right when they unleash it, they can throw something into it, and whatever they throw into it, it will become that. But uh, and if it's the and sorry, the first time they throw something into it, they get two chances to do this. One when they first awaken it, and a second after the game really starts. And if whatever they put into it before the game starts, uh, those memes, the sort not sort of the literal object, but what the object represents, um, becomes part of the world they go into, right? So John's dad is like John's dad thinks he really likes clowns, so he bought him like a big clown doll or Harley Quinn or
Yeah.
something. Uh and John throws it into the Colonel Sprite is what it's called. And what happens is later when they're fighting monsters, all the monsters are like jester themed, right? And so but so it whatever they throw into it the first time, those memes get added to the world, right? And whatever they throw into it, and the second thing they throw into it just makes it become it. So what happens is he, I don't remember what, yeah, he throws the clown doll in it first, and then he's fucking around, and he accidentally spills his grandma's
Oh
ashes
shit.
get knocked into it, and so uh, what the Colonel Sprite becomes like a literal. It becomes a clown version of his grandmother,
Oh
right?
fuck, man.
And well, the other idea is that what the Colonel Sprite is for is it's a spirit guide, right? So you can throw anything into it, but what you want to throw into it is something that can talk, right? Uh, and so because he threw in a clown doll and his grandma, his grandma is now his spirit guide, and they call her Nana Quinn, like Harlequin, Nana Quinn. Right?
Okay, okay.
There's a part later where one of the other kids, Rose, the two things she throws in are so her there's like a lot of parallelism in the story, right? That's I won't go into because it gets really complicated. Like it's honestly one of the most complicated thing.
Well,
They
yeah,
call
he
it the
was just having a
Ulysses.
stream of consciousness, basically, with his
Yeah.
ideas.
Well, they call it the Ulysses of the internet. Like it's like a James Joyce book. There's like all this parallelism and complicated like writing techniques being used. But like there's a part later where Rose, the two things her mom really like thinks she likes princesses, right? So her mom buys her this big princess doll, right? And so she throws that into the thing, and then by her circumstance, oh sorry no, because what but she hates princesses. She's just like a little goth chick, and so what she
Mm-hmm.
does is she cuts off the head off the princess doll and she sews a Cthulhu head onto it, right?
Dude.
And she cuts off the arm, she sews in tentacles. So now it's like this Cthulhu princess wearing a dress with tentacles and a Cthulhu head and like one of those like coned hats, right? And then
Jesus.
she throws that into the Colonel Sprite, but then later on she acts like by some means her the corpse of her dead cat gets thrown into it, and so her spirit is like a Cthulhu princess version of her cat, right? And so it's like oh my god, this is, I mean it's yeah, but I was going somewhere with this. Oh yeah, it's like what if that's what it's like is like we're gonna when we die we prototype the Colonel Sprite with whatever we are, right? And so maybe
Right.
that's where you get heaven and hell is that people who are full of hatred and evil create hatred and evil when they enter the imagination, right? And perhaps I mean this is just me riffing an idea. I don't put any water into this, but like perhaps what's going on is like people were in hell and they called out for help and they were brought here with the hopes of developing them into something that could withstand the imagination and not suffer almost.
Yeah, like how the mycelium network that Paul Stamets talks about is always trying to build something better for the forest, like the trees. If they need some medicine, it'll concoct this chemical combination and feed it into the roots of the tree. And meanwhile, the tree, assists the mycelium by transporting water and moving things around and opening the soil up and doing all kinds of other things that I don't even know about.
I mean, yeah, the it really does seem like the mycelium is intelligent,
Oh
to be
yeah,
honest.
yeah.
And I mean, I mean, that's a fungus, but I think trees probably have some sort of intelligence too that we don't know about.
Well, yeah,
If
we're also interconnected with everything. We need each other, and that calls back to the whole story of the wolves that I was telling you about earlier. Like, you take out one link of the chain, everything goes to shit.
um I wonder if perhaps the plants are actually incredibly wise, and we just don't have a means to communicate with them. You know?
Yeah, have you ever seen the Big Les show?
Holy shit, dude! Nick's introduced me to that not
Yeah,
long
he's
ago. I think.
Australian. Yeah, it's an Australian
Yeah,
show. Um, so there's a scene in it, or an episode, might have been a whole episode, where the Sasquatch people that can move through portals in time and space and go
I
hang
haven't
out.
gotten that far yet, but go
Yeah, they
ahead.
meet Terrence McKenna, bro. Like, you're gonna love it. Like, they meet
Whoa!
him in hyperspace and traveling through these portals. So the Sasquatches are hanging out in the forest and they're watching the trees, but sped up 100 times. And the trees are having a whole conversation with them and doing all this shit and moving around. And they're like, "Oh yeah, thanks, man, I appreciate it." And then they slowed time back down and went about the rest of the episode. So that show is really really cool.
Well,
You're
what I
gonna love
was
that show, bro. We should
what
do
I
a
was
watch party on that in the
oh
summer.
yeah. Yeah, I will say when I started watching it, like I was told it starts out as just a joke and then it develops into this like actually really deep
It
thing.
does.
And I knew that was the case when you get to the final episode of season 1 and like the
Chuma
Les and
Island.
his neighbor. uh I think that might. Oh, maybe that was season 1. Well, he gets back or whatever, and then him and his neighbor, uh, I don't remember what the neighbor's name, the one who's his brother,
Uh-huh.
they get into a fight. The guy who lives across the street, who they hate each other. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes. Yeah, his brother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like they get into this fight, and what made me like so interested is like it's like cartoon physics, right? Where like they're throwing each other fucking through the garage door or the window. They're like beating the absolute shit. They're like doing all these things that a normal human would never survive. And when I'm watching it, I'm thinking like, oh, it's just cartoon. I didn't think anything of it. It's just thought cartoon physics. They're not going to address it. And then his son just says, "Wait, you guys have superpowers?" And I was like, holy shit, what?
Yeah, they're
Because
like
I was
Super
just thinking it was,
Saiyans from another
because I
planet.
was thinking it was, I was thinking it was just going to be cartoon physics, but then they actually address that no, this is not a normal thing in this world for people to be able to survive these things. And then he's like, and then he gets into the whole thing of, okay, son, there's something I've never told you. I come from a planet called Kingdom Come. My dad was the king. I was gonna be king. And I was like, holy shit, dude. Um,
Yeah, he
but
just kept
yeah,
going and going with it, and turned it in. He started a journey on the surface of his mind, and he went deeper and deeper and deeper. And he
yeah,
through by the end of it, he's really fully expressed himself and what he wanted to say, and that's really why he stopped doing it, because he hasn't done any more for years. I mean, let me check real quick, but I don't think he's done any more. I don't know what he does now. He should keep doing it. The last thing he did was a year ago. Sassy the Sasquatch. He did a show about just the Sasquatch, so that's cool. He did
right.
like an offshoot of the
Yeah.
Big Liz show. And he also did
Anyways, I
another
think
thing called Mike Nolan's Long Weekend. That was his other friend that he had.
a friend, yeah,
Yeah,
like saves him from the island.
yeah.
Yeah. Um,
So he created two
yeah,
spin-off shows. I think he just fully expressed himself. He said what he had to
yeah.
say.
So I think, well, let me. I don't know. I'll tell you sometime about the idea I have for a story I want to make. Um, and the way I want to make it is I want it to be sort of a multimedia experience.
Yeah.
Um, so I want to make some parts of it are just going to be a comic, right? And some parts of it I want to make uh, animations, and some parts of it I want to make like interactive. I want to make like short games that tell parts of this story.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I don't want to say it on stream because I don't want anyone to jack my idea because I've been thinking about it for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah.
But uh, but I think we should make our closing statements, or the closing statements, and then I'll tell you about it. We can end the stream there, and
Okay.
I'll tell you about it, and then I'm gonna go to bed.
Yeah.
But if I could make a closing statement, it would just be, there is hope. There is hope. Do not do not give in to the nothing. There is hope. We can make the world a better place. It just, you know,
Yes.
it just it just requires um a good heart, and it just requires healing, and it's not going to be easy, but I think when things get worse, you know, often, when things get really shitty, when disasters happen, sure, you see people looting, but you also see people helping each other. You see people banding together. You see acts of heroism, and I just think when things start getting worse, either with the climate or with the war situation in the world, when the world gets darker, that's the moment of opportunity. That's the moment where you need to, just remind the people around you. We are children of the universe, and we have to stick together because we're a family. You know?
Yes. Yeah, I agree with you, man. We just got to talk it out. We got to figure it
Yeah.
out and not get in the argumentative debate mindset of I'm right, you're wrong. Uh, I think people are tired of that. I'm tired of that. Uh, this format of communication is much better, and it actually gets somewhere. It allows your mind to wander around, and you're not so, uh, you know, afraid somebody's going to say you're dumb or retarded or that's a stupid idea, because it's a nice place to just play around. We gotta
Yeah.
learn how to play with one another, uh, in a healthy format, and
Yeah.
not just battle
Because
all the time.
I think that's what we've always been meant to do.
Yes.
Smell the roses, go for a run, throw a ball around.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, oh, uh, I know we just said closing statements, but let me tell you about one more thing.
Do it.
You'll like this. There's a comic. Uh, okay, let me find the name of this. What football will make in the future? Title. Uh, so it's called 17,776, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was this is actually one of my inspirations for the story I want to tell.
Okay.
But it was a multimedia web comic, right? And basically what it was about was thousands of years ago, humans humans invented humans the tech humans technologically invented, um basically humans transcended beyond death, right? And you're not, if you think you know where this is going, you have no idea. Okay, it's
Okay.
hilarious. Okay, so humans basically use technology to stop death from ever happening again, right? So everyone was immortal, and so what happened was everyone got really bored, right?
Yeah.
And so everyone got really bored, and what they started to do to pass the time was they started playing football. And just over the course of thousands of years, the whole concept of football like evolved and changed, right? And so it's like what is a football, what is a field, what is a goalpost, like. And so like people are playing all these games of football, um but like the rules are completely different for every game, and that's what humans do, is they play all these crazy games of football. and
Yes.
the and and the main characters are like these like AI sentient like satellites who like woke up over the course of thousands of years and were finally able to get close enough orbit that they could talk. So what the comic is just these sentient satellites like watching the humans play football, right? But like no one can agree on what football even is. So there's this one game of football where like uh there's one guy, and he was like a professional football player, and he signed a bunch of footballs for fans or something, and someone took all those footballs and hid them across the world. And so the idea is whoever gets all the footballs and takes them to the end post wins the game. So it's like this treasure hunt. There's like a football game where the field is like stretched across the entire left and right halves of America. Like there's football games where like, right, and it's like it's like it's really funny, but it's like funny in a way that's like I wish that was the world I lived in. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not literally in the sense of football, but imagine if that's what we did. Like imagine like humans develop and we're just like how can I kick this ball? Like how can I do the craziest like acrobat like imagine like we started mixing the different athleticisms, and so it's like you're playing football, but you in order to be competitive you also have to be an acrobat so that you can do like crazy trick shots because you're not just trying to get it to the end of the goal. There's like a panel of judges and they're judging how cool your kick was. Right, like crazy shit like that, right? um but yeah, we can call it here if you're ready.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Let's land this plane. So yeah, everybody, put your seat backs and tray tables must be placed in their upright and locked positions. We're about to land. Thank you for joining us through this wonderful conversation. I really enjoyed it, Dude Missile, and I hope we do it again here soon.
Yeah, you said you felt like we could do it 3 hours, and we did it.
We did it for 3 hours and 45 minutes. I
Oh
call
my God.
that I call that a good time.